Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. Killing Them Softly, 2012, Movie Review. Killing Them Softly is a 2012 American neo-noir crime film written and directed by Dominik, and starring Brad Pitt. It is based on George V. Higgins's 1974 novel Cogan's Trade. The story follows Jackie Cogan, a hitman who is hired to deal with the aftermath of a mafia poker game robbery that ruptured the criminal economy. The events are set during the 2008 United States presidential election and the 2008 financial crisis. Also starring in the film are Scoot McNairy, Ben Mendelsohn, Richard Jenkins, James Gandolfini, Ray Liotta, and Sam Shepard. On May 22, 2012, the film premiered in competition for the Palme d'Or at the 2012 Cannes Film Festival and received positive early reviews. Killing Them Softly was released on November 30, 2012, domestically by the Weinstein Company and internationally by Inferno Distribution, to mostly positive reviews. It grossed $37.9 million against a budget of $15 million. During the 2008 financial crisis and 2008 United States presidential election, Johnny Squirrel Amato plans to rob a mafia-controlled private poker game in Boston. He enlists Frankie, a former business associate, and Russell, a heroin-addicted Australian immigrant who steals purebred dogs to sell in Florida. They target a game run by Marky Trapman, who is known to have previously orchestrated an inside job by paying two men to rob his own illegal poker game. Squirrel anticipates that Marky will be the obvious suspect, and the crime syndicate Marky is involved with will simply have him killed without investigating further. Though obviously inexperienced, Frankie and Russell successfully carry out the armed robbery and escape with approximately $100,000. The driver, a mob lawyer who reports to the group running the crime syndicate, discusses with hitman Jackie Cogan on how to deal with the situation created by the robbery. Mob-operated poker games have stopped as players fear more violence, throwing the underground criminal economy into chaos. Although Jackie correctly intuits Marky was innocent, he believes Marky needs to die regardless, as if no example is made it would encourage further robberies by street-level thugs. Driver pushes back strongly on having Marky murdered and Jackie reluctantly agrees to only having him beaten. Meanwhile, Russell travels to Florida with a man named Kenny Gill to sell the stolen dogs. While trying to recruit Kenny as a drug dealer, Russell inadvertently reveals his involvement in the heist. Kenny, being acquainted with a hitman named Dylan who knows both Jackie and Driver, informs Dylan that Russell, Frankie, and Squirrel are the perpetrators. Jackie finally convinces Driver that Marky must die, and with Kenny driving, Jackie kills Marky from the rear seat of the car. Three targets remain: Russell, Frankie, and Squirrel, but Jackie is reluctant to take the hit on Squirrel, as he and Jackie are acquainted. Jackie convinces Driver to bring in another hitman, Mickey Fallon, of whom Jackie speaks highly. While explaining why he wants to hire Mickey, Jackie explains to Driver his philosophy of killing them softly, killing his targets from a distance or in ways which allow them no chance to experience fear, despair, or suffering of any kind. Mickey, holed up in an expensive hotel room, indulges in binge drinking and sex with prostitutes instead of carrying out the hit. Admitting to Jackie how he violated his parole to be out of state, Jackie arranges Mickey's arrest and extradition back to New York, deciding to kill Squirrel himself. Before Jackie gets to him, Russell is arrested on a drug possession charge. Meanwhile, Jackie confronts Frankie and convinces him to trade Squirrel's whereabouts for his life. Jackie has Frankie drive him to where Squirrel will have his regular rendezvous with a woman, and he kills Squirrel with a shotgun. After confirming Squirrel is dead, Jackie and Frankie drive to the parking garage where Jackie shoots Frankie in the head without warning. Jackie wipes down the car and leaves the scene. On the night of the presidential election, Jackie meets with Driver to collect his fee for the three hits. On the TV in the bar, Barack Obama is giving his election victory speech. The two argue over his fee, with Driver trying to pay a lesser amount. Jackie mocks Obama's words on Community, declaring that America is just a business, and demands the full sum. Killing Them Softly is based on the 1974 novel Cogan's Trade by George V. Higgins. Cogan's Trade, like Higgins' other novels, takes place in Boston. Although filmed in the New Orleans area, characters in Killing Them Softly make several references to Boston area suburbs from the original novel. The film was written and directed by Dominik, who chose to update the setting of the story, saying, "As I started adapting it, it was the story of an economic crisis, and it was an economic crisis in an economy that was funded by gambling, and the crisis occurred due to a failure in regulation. It just seemed to have something that you couldn't ignore." The project was first announced in November 2010, when Brad Pitt was reported to be in talks to star in it. Dominik asked Pitt if he was interested in a role via a text message. He replied yes, and the matter was settled over half an hour. Pitt previously co-starred in Dominik's The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, 2007. Production was scheduled to begin in Louisiana in March 2011, with pre-production beginning in January. Additional roles were cast in early 2011. According to Garrett Dillahunt, the film's first cut was 2.5 hours long. Dillahunt, who had a cameo in the film, did not make the final cut for the theatrical release. The music in the film is primarily taken from pop, rock and R&B songs from many artists and decades, with the exception of one original song, The Feeling in My Nuts, by Mark Streitenfeld, which James Christopher Munger of AllMusic said matched the film's idiosyncratic nature. Rachel Fox supervised the song implementation. The soundtrack album was sold containing most of the songs heard in the film, and substituting some instrumental versions which were not heard. The song Windmills of Your Mind, sung by Petula Clark, was in the film but not included on the soundtrack album. Killing Them Softly premiered at the 65th Cannes Film Festival on May 22, 2012, where it was selected to be in competition for the Palme d'Or. The film was scheduled to be released in the United States on September 21, 2012, however it was delayed until November 30, 2012, to avoid competing with The Master and to improve its chances for award nominations. The film kept its original release date in other parts of the world, with the somewhat unusual result that it opened in the UK and India more than 2 months before the US opening. The Weinstein Company distributed the film theatrically in the US and Canada, while Inferno Distribution released internationally. Killing Them Softly was released by the Weinstein Company Home Entertainment and Anchor Bay Entertainment on Blu-ray and DVD March 26, 2013. The film was released in Australia earlier, on February 13, and on February 25 in the UK. In its opening weekend, Killing Them Softly grossed $6.8 million. The film made $15 million domestically and $22.9 million internationally for a worldwide total of $37.9 million. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 74% based on 234 reviews, with an average rating of 6.90/10. The site's critical consensus reads, Killing Them Softly is a darkly comic, visceral thriller that doubles as a cautionary tale on capitalism, whose message is delivered with sledgehammer force. On Metacritic, the film received a weighted average score of 64 out of 100, based on 42 critics indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film a rare average grade of F on an A+ to F scale. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian gave Killing Them Softly 5 stars, saying the film is a compelling comment on economic bloodletting in the real world. Tim Roby of The Daily Telegraph gave the film 4 stars, describing it as bleakly electrifying. Total Film awarded it 3 stars, calling it tough, stylish, violent and studded with stars, but countered that it doesn't quite get the job done. Roger Ebert gave the film 2 stars out of 4, calling it a dismal, dreary series of cruel and painful murders cast in a similarly dreary and joyless cityscape. He also found the performances dependent mostly on the actors' established screen presences, while pointing out improbabilities in the plot, such as how the mafia manages to support itself without crimes involving civilians. Like a captive animal struggling to free itself from a trap, they seem reduced to gnawing off their own legs. There's something unnerving about a hitman who keeps himself composed for most of a film's runtime. No, not the killings, those are assured, but a man who keeps his speech even and level, emotionless even, while dealing with thugs, hoods, and underlings. Brad Pitt pulls this off in the protracted crime drama Killing Them Softly, highlighted by pressured cinematography and an eerie sense of dread, where he plays a hitman named Jackie. His even keel breaks slightly, towards the film's final sentence. His dead eyes glow a light, as they often do in movies like this when hitmen aren't to be paid, and it hits with cinematic perfection. You have to hand it to Andrew Dominik, the director and co-writer of this film. George V. Higgins wrote the novel it's based on, Kogan's Trade, for making a movie that sticks it to you with dialogue instead of blood and guts. It's clear that Dominik is influenced by crime films such as The Departed here, as well as poetic dramas like David Mamet's Glengarry Glen Ross. So many conversations take place in this film and so little action. Its winning argument is that it keeps our attention. What works about this film is its lead, played patiently and superbly by Pitt, is for all intents and purposes the narrator, though this is not a narrated film. He's in most every scene, save the film's tense beginning, and casts a nonchalance on the business of killing that's eerie to behold. It's not that he wants to do these things, it's that he has to. He works for the mob as a hired gun, except in this town, which we learn is New Orleans, but never seen or felt. The mob is indecisive and he often has to describe to their handler, a stoic Richard Jenkins, what must be done. He doesn't sound like a killer, but a grandfather imparting wisdom. It's an odd play that makes this one of the more believable hitman portrayals I've seen on screen. The life is not all glamour and riches. It's tactics, and nothing more. Jackie is called in due to a complicated heist by three criminals, Scoot McNairy and Ben Mendelsohn, chiefly, on a mafia poker game, and we see that the runner of the game, a reserved and effective Ray Liotta, has ripped off his own game before. Most think he wouldn't be stupid enough to try it again, and they'd be right. But what's interesting about Killing Them Softly is that the film doesn't try to be a whodunit. We know all three who ripped off the card game, and we know that Jackie knows it too. The devil is in the details here, namely the dialogue, and it's written to perfection. I've seen some other critics complain about the juxtaposition of this film's dealings, namely mob business, with economics and Barack Obama's election, but honestly I think it misses the point of Dominik's film. To me, Killing Them Softly isn't so much about mob business as it is about a hitman without a conscience who also happens to have manners, and it lands in an odd place. Sure, Jackie handles business in the same cold, compassionless way as business moguls in films like Wall Street. But the film goes out of its way to highlight his dispassionate demeanor while discussing all sorts of ghastly things. For a movie about a hitman, there's only about 1 minute of screen time devoted to killing here, and one beating that's worse than all the death. It's the fact that Jackie seems not to want to do much of it that makes the movie's impact greater than a glee-seeking killer. Waste of time, I said. Waste of money, I said, Jackie retorts in response to the beating. If there's one criticism to make, I feel the cinematography is often a bit too much. It's not off-putting or ill-fitting, it just often feels too prolonged, too slow, to something that is hard to put your finger on. Sometimes it's great. For instance, a scene where Jackie walks through a dangerous neighborhood with a murder taking place behind him, without a glance, has excellent timing. But an assassination later on lasts for much too long and far too slowly to fit with the film's style. This is a slow film, filled with dialogue. I feel the action should have been quick-hitting, but that's just my opinion. However, what Killing Them Softly is, a title which refers to Jackie's way of killing from afar, he doesn't like to deal with all the emotions, is a movie as cold as its lead. Pitt is required to act well, and that he does, but he doesn't steal the show. Each character from McNairy to Mendelsohn to the late James Gandolfini play their parts well. The film feels and lands almost like a play. Not as much as in the aforementioned Glengarry Glen Ross, but enough to make you feel these characters. It's sometimes tense, and sometimes uncomfortable, but you feel them. This might be Killing Them Softly's greatest achievement. This is a good film. It's slow, purposeful, and bleak. Pitt is at the top of his game here, and Dominik himself was nominated for a Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. Lovers of action and hard-hitting scenes will find little to like here. This is a pensive film, and a meditation on the crime thriller. It's not flawless, but it works. Its character development and dialogue are top-notch. And, if you're like me, its end will leave you smiling. That's morbid, I suppose. But we're supposed to like films, are we not? Killing Them Softly basks its anti-hero in intrigue and then in its dying moments lets the veneer fall. It's done so sleekly I wonder why I didn't see it coming. Killing Them Softly really bludgeons you over the head with its message. Set during the 2008 presidential election and financial crisis, Killing Them Softly showcases the effects of these years on the crime in New Orleans. While the premise provides a nice spin on the crime genre, Killing Them Softly suffers from pacing issues and zero story complexity. It is better than the recent string of B-movie crime stories, but it's nowhere near the level of Goodfellas, the pinnacle of this side of the crime genre. Remember when Lehman Brothers collapsed? It was a time of confusion, anger, and apprehension that enveloped most of the country. Apparently, under the surface, similar strains were being felt in the crime industry. Things get so bad that Johnny Amato, Vincent Curatola, a local dry cleaners owner, hires local crony Frankie, Scoot McNairy, and new-to-town Russell, Ben Mendelsohn, to hit a local underground poker game run by Marky, Ray Liotta, because Marky has hit his own game in the past and will be blamed for this one. The two succeed, but the mob calls in reinforcements. Driver, Richard Jenkins, a mob spokesman, brings Jackie, Brad Pitt, to town to find out who stuck the game up and bring them to the mob's version of justice. Jackie is known by one of the people involved, so he suggests the mob bring an older hitman to kill the other man, but Mickey, James Gandolfini, has a past that is messing with his present that adds complications to the simple plan. The hook of killing them softly, these are not spoilers, is that the underground crime is actually a nice parallel to the country as a whole, that crime has its own set of rules and systems that also crumbled when the economy collapsed. For people living on the surface of society, it was more comfortable to assume that crime was infused with anarchy due to excessive power struggles, but here, crime is run by an unseen few who send orders to others at cheaper prices than normal because of the economy. The top brass are wishy-washy with their decisions to the workers, and some actions have to be taken to appeal to public sentiment. Sound familiar? I wish the title took more time to be subtle with its parallel. Anytime some aspect of the collapse is compared to the mob, it is explicitly stated to the audience. Killing them softly wants to be taken seriously, so it is unfair to pander to an audience that is ready to take it seriously. Killing Them Softly contains pieces of both The Godfather and Goodfellas. Like The Godfather, the pace is slower and more deliberate. This isn't always a bad thing. Slower pace can really elevate the tension or the consequences of characters' actions. Killing Them Softly has a bipolar disorder with its pacing. On the one hand, the card game was nicely tense and smartly executed, showing the full extent of the robbery. However, scenes with Brad Pitt and James Gandolfini drag on a few minutes too long for the purposes of the story and the characters. Like Goodfellas, Killing Them Softly showcases the grisly side of the crime syndicate. Ray Liotta takes a beating of which I have not seen on screen, a solid reminder for why I chose the straight life. Russell runs a side business of dog kidnapping in addition to his robbery. The scenes looked like they were filmed in the Ninth Ward, still ravaged by Katrina's effects. Some of the drug use is over-stylized and unnecessary, but the setting and tone are hard to escape in Killing Them Softly. Hell, even the mid-level bosses have crappy homes. Acting here is a mixed bag as well. I've heard people talk about how great James Gandolfini is in this, and I don't see it. Sure, he is projecting sadness in his speeches, but the speeches themselves don't showcase a great acting talent here. Brad Pitt is solid as Jackie, a fun enigma with good execution, pun intended. He is playing the audience's voice in this story, and while not Tyler Durden, he certainly isn't bad. Scoot McNairy is good as the in-over-his-head thug, and the rest of the cast is fine if leaving little impression. This is America and give me my bleeping money. No line better exemplifies Killing Them Softly than this one. Though inconsistent, Killing Them Softly provides a dire manifestation of the financial crisis and how it has hit all walks of American life. One thing I will never understand about it though, why does every bar in New Orleans have CSPN on TV? I believe the Saints were in the middle of the playoff picture at this point. This is business, not personal, is one of the classic lines spoken in The Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola's 1972 masterpiece about Italian-American organized crime, and it's become a line synonymous with the film's capitalism allegory. While the gangster and crime genres have long been an ideal template for critiquing the indifferent whims and inequalities of the free market and the greed and borderline psychopathic behavior of the financial sector, few have so overtly and rigorous explored the metaphor to the extent of Andrew Dominik's Killing Them Softly. While it is adapted from the 1974 novel Cogan's Trade by George V. Higgins, Killing Them Softly is a character-driven crime drama set during the beginning of the global financial crisis and the 2008 Obama/McCain election. Continual news broadcasts in the background announce the oncoming financial crisis along with speeches by outgoing President George W. Bush and incoming President Barack Obama. This provides a backdrop to the film's story of Jackie Cogan, Brad Pitt, a professional organized crime enforcer who comes to town to investigate a card game heist. The system Kogan needs to protect has been threatened by petty criminals trying to reach above their status in a time of economic uncertainty, and Kogan's employers do not need that instability. The guilty parties need to be held to account, and some calculated collateral damage will also need to occur to ensure the people at the top continue getting paid and good PR is maintained. The crime/capitalism metaphor is anything but subtle, and the final line of the film really rams home the message in case anybody still hasn't picked it up, but that doesn't stop Killing Them Softly from being a potent critique of what is rotten at the core of contemporary American capitalism. Just as the political speeches ring hollow with the usual rhetoric, the classic gangster/capitalist ideal of individualism is revealed to be an unobtainable myth. The bottom-dwelling criminals who aspire to more by pulling one supposedly foolproof heist soon discover that they cannot possibly beat the system. While the myth of the lone enforcer is expressed through the Kogan character, he still answers to a committee of criminals via their lawyer, known simply as Driver, Richard Jenkins. And like in many Martin Scorsese films, especially Goodfellas, which shares Killing Them Softly actor Ray Liotta, as well as the cable television series The Sopranos, which shares actors including James Gandolfini, the characters aren't guaranteed a big climatic finale. Some die off-screen, some simply leave the narrative through more mundane plot developments. The romantic notion of hitting the big time and then exiting in a blaze of glory is undermined, reflecting the reality that most people fade away with a whimper rather than a bang of a gun. Cars play an important part in Killing Them Softly for also demythologizing the promises of 21st century capitalism. Particularly in classical Hollywood cinema, cars have represented freedom, youthfulness, and affluence. They are a perfect symbol of the great American dream, a mass-produced status symbol with the power to speed the owner away to a better place. In Killing Them Softly, cars represent death. They are the recurring meeting place for Kogan and Driver, where they debate who needs to die and who needs to be simply beaten in order to maintain the status quo. Furthermore, all on-screen deaths and other acts of violence occur inside cars or next to cars, stripping them of their liberating power and leaving them impotent. The cynical and ruthless themes are also expressed visually. The brown and orange look of the film captures the feelings of decay and depression, establishing the setting as a type of urban frontier, untamed and existing on the fringes. The jarring sound and visual editing during the credits and opening scene very effectively establish the unnerving and fragmented world that the film takes place in. Most impressive is the extraordinary sound design and Greg Fraser's cinematography. The heist scene boasts an almost unbearable tension, while key scenes of violence are turned in grotesque mini-performance pieces where every time a punch lands or a gun is fired, the moment is experienced viscerally by the audience. One disturbing yet captivating death scene is shot in ultra-slow motion to become a visual symphony of rain, broken glass, and blood. Other characters may fade away, but those who do get to exit dramatically become a spectacle of brutality and agony, where the audience experiences every splatter of blood and every torn piece of flesh. Killing Them Softly is the work of an extremely confident filmmaker. While having previously explored larger-than-life criminals/anti-heroes in Chopper, 2000, and the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 2007, Dominik reaches new heights with this crime parable. Incorporating several stunning stylized moments with a grim, gritty reality, Killing Them Softly is an engrossing vision of hell where status, money and image have become the ultimate goals and human life is just another commodity to be traded. Director Dominik's third feature film after Chopper and the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 2012's Killing Them Softly is a brutal tale of mob politics based on George V. Higgins' 1974 novel Kogan's Trade. On top of being a gritty gangster picture, the film provides a thoughtful commentary on America's current political and economical climate. Indeed, Dominik highlights that the mob and the government are in fact very similar, though neither party is prepared to admit it. For those unwilling to pay full attention and engage their brain, Killing Them Softly may be ultimately unsatisfying, as it asks more of you than a routine shoot-'em-up. While the film is maddening from time to time, it does contain a number of inspired moments, and it's rich with atmosphere and nuance. With the 2008 presidential election looming, a low-level gangster named Johnny Amato Curatola hires a pair of grungy hoods, McNairy and Mendelsohn, to rob a mob card game. The organizer of the card game, Marky Liotta, has been known for robbing his own game in the past, and thus the robbers believe that the street will just assume that Marky is to blame yet again. After the heist, an unnamed mafia middleman, Jenkins, brings in an enforcer named Jackie Cogan, Pitt, to sort out the situation. Cogan's task is to seek reparations for the stolen money and kill anyone necessary in the process. Killing them softly clocks in at a refreshingly brisk 95 minutes, though Dominik's first cut reportedly ran a more sizable 2.5 hours. As a result, the picture does feel unusually streamlined, and the dialogue is perhaps a tad too terse, rendering the narrative somewhat difficult to follow. With a few key events actually happening off-screen, Killing Them Softly demands your fullest attention lest you get hopelessly lost. Interestingly, one of the primary concerns of Dominik's screenplay is social commentary. At several points throughout the film, characters literally stop what they're doing to listen to speeches delivered by either Obama or McCain as they lament the dire state of the American economy. Dominik draws parallels between mobsters and politicians, as both types of individuals only really care about themselves and are driven by the relentless pursuit of money. The very final line of dialogue delivered by Pitt solidifies this underlying theme in a very thought-provoking manner. Fortunately, Dominik supplemented the biting political satire with dark humor. Killing Them Softly is littered with amusing banter, as well as a memorably terrific instance of slapstick. Dominik is so often recognized for his distinctive cinematic style, and rightfully so, but his talent for colorful dialogue deserves acknowledgement as well. From a technical standpoint, Andrew Dominik's efforts are immaculate here. The picture exudes a marvelous sense of visual command, and it's slick and stylized while still feeling somewhat raw. The moments of violence are especially impressive thanks to Greg Fraser's cinematography and the extraordinary sound design. The heist sequence is nail-bitingly tense, and every time a punch is landed or a gun is discharged, we experience it in a visceral fashion. The death of one character is especially remarkable. It unfolds in ultra-slow motion, letting us absorb the visual symphony of bullets, broken glass, falling rain, and blood. It's a true spectacle of brutality, perhaps one of the most memorable instances of cinematic bloodshed in 2012. Another excellent touch is the music. Killing Them Softly is not suffused with an original score. Instead, Dominik mostly relied on an array of songs which add a great atmosphere to the picture. The most notable song choice is Johnny Cash's The Man Comes Around. The lyrics have strong parallels to the Jackie Cogan character, and the melodies are haunting. The cast is solid from top to bottom, but it's Brad Pitt who deserves the most credit. As Cogan, the actor is spot on, playing an interesting and complex anti-hero which is far removed from the type of performance we often see from him. Meanwhile, Richard Jenkins is predictably excellent here. Jenkins is suitably understated and low-key, yet always believable and riveting. Equally terrific is James Gandolfini as Mickey, one of Cogan's acquaintances. Rounding out the key players is Ben Mendelsohn, Animal Kingdom, who's skin-crawlingly creepy as a low-level hood, and Ray Liotta, who is surprisingly multifaceted as Gangster Marky. It's somewhat of a challenge to review Andrew Dominik's Killing Them Softly, as my thoughts on the film were actually changing throughout the writing process. Immediately after viewing the film I was left somewhat unfulfilled, but the more I contemplate it, the more I appreciate it. Ultimately, this is a solid motion picture, a stylized gangster flick with a relevant message that demands multiple viewings. I once read that Andrew Dominik can't understand filmmakers like Ridley Scott, his example, not mine, who feel compelled to constantly create. Considering his growing reputation as one of Hollywood's finest filmmakers, it's still a surprise to visit Dominik's IMDb page to see only 3 directorial credits under his belt. But there is something refreshing about Dominik's reluctance to rush. Since he burst out onto the scene with the intense Australian crime flick Chopper in 2000, Dominik has taken his time. But God admit, he's used his time well. Though perhaps understandable, it was a shame to see his second film, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 2007, underachieve at the box office. It is one of the finest films to come out of Hollywood in the past decade. I guess star Brad Pitt didn't feel that working on the film was a waste of time. He reportedly agreed to work with Dominik again on the recently released Killing Them Softly via text message in less than half an hour. The film, based on George V. Higgins' 1974 pulp fiction novel Cogan's Trade, follows Jackie Cogan, Pitt, an enforcer for the mob who arrives in a nameless town to investigate the robbery of an illegal high-stakes card game. There is little more to the plot than that, but plot is never paramount in Killing Them Softly, an unfortunate name. It was originally going to be released under Higgins' original title. The film is about the characters, all incredibly realized by a fantastic collection of actors including Richard Jenkins, Scoot McNairy, James Gandolfini, Ray Liotta, and Ben Mendelsohn. Since Chopper, Dominik has displayed an interest in loquacious ruffians, and Killing Them Softly continues the trend. But the characters that inhabit the film are a world apart from the talkative gangsters that have been dominating our screens since Reservoir Dogs, 1992. Kogan and his associates are more comfortable waxing lyrical about their social environment, perhaps not something you would witness most criminals doing, but certainly in keeping with the hard-boiled style of Higgins' writing. Dominating the focus is Pitt, again proving he is a far better actor when he pushes himself. Real good aficionados may note that another recently published article suggested he is a character actor born in the body of a leading man, and I am inclined to agree with myself. If for every Troy, 2004, and Ocean's 11, 2001, Pitt creates characters like Chad in Burn After Reading, 2008, and Richard Jones in Babel, 2006, then perhaps the crap-to-good ratio might work out okay. The other true star of the film is Dominik, without doubt one of the most exciting directors working in Hollywood. He is a filmmaker totally in command of his own style. This may not sound impressive, but it is quite remarkable how few mainstream filmmakers feel comfortable pushing their own sensibilities into a studio film. Dominik has no such problem, lending Killing Them Softly his own distinct and exciting style. He manages to acknowledge the rich history of the gangster film without completely subscribing to it. It is worth noting that Dominik has updated Higgins' original novel to the setting of the 2008 financial crisis, maybe both the film's greatest attribute and greatest flaw. The change of setting lends the gambling plot a bit more purpose, but Dominik stresses the idea perhaps a bit persistently. But there is so much to admire in Killing Them Softly that any detractors seem like a side note. Directors with such a strong track record are few and far between, and it's fantastic to see an Australian filmmaker continually create such quality. It may be a while until we see his next film, but when the outcome is this good, it is most certainly worth the wait. Last evening, January 19, 2023, I had the twisted pleasure in finally seeing Blonde, Andrew Dominik's latest cinematic offering, and a bleak, dark, brutal depiction of the unfairly short life of Marilyn Monroe. I now have a page of notes to transcribe into a vaguely coherent review, and when complete, I'll release this hot on the heels of my thoughts on Andrew's second film, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, and now hear his third film, Killing Them Softly. By way of a brief introduction to the New Zealand-born filmmaker's third film, I'm writing this exactly a decade and a handful of days on from my original review, and the recurring themes are alarming to say the least. Government spending, the business of war, societal decay, a choice of two colors from a one-party rainbow, and yet another bailing out of an institution dealing in financial make-believe fairy dust. The coming plague has come and gone apparently, but the plague of a fractured society driven to deadly desperation is never going away. Killing Them Softly is based on a 1974 George V. Higgins novel titled Kogan's Trade. Every synopsis I've come across purports the film to be about professional enforcer Jackie Kogan, Brad Pitt, as he investigates the heist of a mob-protected poker game. That's a small part of the actual movie. Pitt is on screen for maybe 30 minutes out of the hour and a half running time. It's a classic bait and switch. There's a big difference between Brad Pitt's the star of this film and Brad Pitt is in this movie. This is really about the heist and the rippling repercussions the robbery has throughout the mafia world of New Orleans, set against the backdrop of America's economic problems of the near past, and still persisting at the time of this review. Will Kogan get his man, or will I fall asleep first? I've never read Kogan's Trade, but clearly this film has been updated from the nearly 40-year-old novel. How much has changed I couldn't tell you. This is a laboriously slow-paced crime drama that sacrifices storytelling efficiency for wannabe artistic merit. Killing Them Softly reaches to be the Watchmen of gangster movies. It's a didactic mess of talking heads. There's so much dialogue in this film, it's a wonder they ever get around to killing anyone. The artistic brutality is unwarranted and frankly out of place. Yes, shooting someone in the head through a car window in slow motion looks cool. But it's not as big of a wow factor as the filmmakers think, especially when I don't care about the shooter or the man being shot. The performances are overly intense, with Pitt doing a reduced version of his face-touching routine. Unfortunately, the acting is muted as actors are given mouthful after mouthful of dialogue to regurgitate. Watching two people talk for 10 minutes straight in a car, which is most scenes, takes a little bit away from every delivery, and after some time the hand gestures and eyebrow raising just seems normal. This movie talks itself out. And while I've seen the blurbs about how brutal Killing Them Softly is, it's not enough to save the film or inject any sort of energy into it. The production feels cheap, and while it does have a large cast including A-lister Pitt, the majority of the players are typecasted mafia men such as James Gandolfini, Vincent Curatola, and Ray Liotta. This is the kind of artistic fodder the Weinstein company salivates over, and it's no wonder they picked this one up. I don't understand how after so many years in the business the Weinsteins just don't get the medium of film. Stop trying to cram an idea down people's throats. In this case, I don't need you to connect the dots from how the mafia runs things to how Wall Street runs things. If you need to keep throwing in these discussions into your dialogue for your audience to make the connection, then maybe the movie isn't really about what you're trying to make it about. This is a film that's supposedly about two guys who rob a mafia-run poker game and the guy that comes in to clean up the mess. It's not about the government or America or Wall Street. Parallels can be drawn, but it's not the filmmaker's place to force those parallels onto their audience. Killing Them Softly tries too hard to be too relevant for a cheap mafia crime drama and ultimately comes off as a preachy bore. Set in New Orleans, for years ago, Killing Them Softly tells the story of two small-time, inept crooks, Frankie, McNairy, and Russell, Ben Mendelsohn, who are contracted to blag a mafia-protected card game. Usually robbing one of these games is a suicide run, but this particular game has been turned over before by the gangster running it, Marky Trapman, Liotta. This way, if the game is robbed in the same manner it was previously, everyone will place the blame on Marky and no one will think to look for Frankie or Russell. Everything goes pretty much according to plan, the game is hijacked, money stolen, and Marky held accountable. At this point, an unnamed character who organizes all the corporate aspects of the criminal underworld, played by contacts a hitman of sorts to clean up, the individual in question being Jackie Cogan. At which point it becomes evident that this is in fact not Frankie's story but Jackie's. Much like Dominik's previous works, this film is a technical wonder. The shots are beautifully crafted and arranged with care and precision. Everything on screen has a specific purpose and place in the dreary, rundown sets and locations. Equally, the editing is neatly orchestrated, favoring a calm, steady slow burn over manic fast-paced unnecessary action sets or screamy shouty confrontations. In a way, I was reminded of Get Carter and many other crime dramas of the 70s, slow, moody pacing, intimidating dialogue, bleak surroundings and brief moments of intense violence. A story set to a backdrop of criminal activity, showing us the truth to all criminal activity: there is no glamour. Even when flush, you never get the feeling that any of the characters are ahead, always swindling and cheating each other, constantly looking over their shoulder for betrayal and comeuppance. But amidst all this realism, we have Jackie Cogan, a man sporting a muscle car, aviator sunglasses, leather jacket, dressed head to toe in black and not an ounce of hesitation or remorse, a man built for murder. This should come off as contradictory. We should be questioning this individual's presence and existence in a tale of this nature, but his disdain for beatings and torturous acts, seeing death as a mercy or necessary release, and professional precision simply highlight him as a soldier desensitized to the act of death. But despite the compelling performances and series of exceptionally executed conversations, Killing Them Softly left me a little disorientated. Brilliantly crafted, but as a story, wholly unsatisfying. Had the acting not been up to scratch, you would have ended up with a straight-to-DVD flop, but if everything was harmoniously coordinated, if every aspect was cohesively bonding together, we would have got something similar to Drive. A friend of mine recently challenged my review for Lawless, stating that while she enjoyed the technical aspects of the film, the story wasn't enough for her. Now, while I completely disagree with that example, that's exactly how I feel about this film. One could argue that it's a character film and the plot is simply there to further the interactions between memorable characters, almost like a Woody Allen movie, but with so many disposable cameos that seem to fizzle into nothing and a narrative that can be summed up in 2 sentences, it's hard to enjoy this film. Having said that, I know Andrew Dominik's work has a tendency to spool on, Terrence Malick style, and because the original cut was around 2.5 hours, I imagine much of what I'm looking for is lying somewhere on the cutting room floor. The constant sampling of political speeches are an interesting touch. Everyone involved probably thought they were being quite subtle and clever, but the comparison between unregulated unlawful gambling losses and the economic crisis is rather blunt. Subtle or not, you cannot deny it makes a clear point: crime isn't cool, it's reckless, stupid, and if you get involved in it, it will turn on you like a rabid dog and bite you on the fucking arse. What the fuck were you thinking? What did you think would happen? Let's face it, the public does not understand basic economics or how the 2008 banking crisis happened. All they see is the base-level fallout and wildly blame anyone they feel is deserving. Killing Them Softly draws a simple, relatable parable by stating these individuals stole from this individual and he let it happen. Whether or not he could prevent it, he is responsible. This is what happened to you, but on a much larger scale, way over your head. Get it? In my opinion, this film is going to be incredibly divisive. There will be those who will perceive it as a dull, boring affair due to its pace, and others who will herald it as a return to credible, gritty gangster flicks. Personally, I'm not convinced. Chopper was glorious. The assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford was a marvel, but Killing Them Softly is just very good. It's not that it's a bad film, I was simply expecting a lot more from Andrew Dominik. Life imitates art, it could be argued, with Andrew Dominik's latest film, Killing Them Softly, a talky genre effort with the repetitive din of the 2008 presidential elections buzzing in the background, and the economic recession nearly materializing as a physical character itself, so many times it is invoked as the impetus for each character's action. Because of its heavily stylized and overt nihilism about the ignorant posturing of American life, Dominik's latest film may not receive the championing reception it deserves, but several decades from now, a generation or two removed from the financial woes of 2008, should grant the film a reputation of note, even if the plot is perilously paper-thin. Johnny Amato, Vincent Curatola, who runs a dry cleaning business with underworld ties on the side, has come up with an idea to rob a mob-protected card game. In order to do this, Johnny hires Frankie, Scoot McNairy, a freshly paroled criminal, in need of some fast dough. For a second gunman, Frankie brings along a seedy Australian junkie, Russell, Ben Mendelsohn, currently operating his own dog theft business, not unlike a similar scheme by some fluffier characters in this year's 7 Psychopaths. Because the card game's dealer, Marky Tradham, Ray Liotta, knocked over his own card game once before, and not only got away with it but later bragged about it, Johnny Amato figures that if the game gets hit again, Tradham will take the fall, even if he's found to be completely innocent. After Frankie and Russell commit the deed, the mob brings in a seasoned enforcer, Jackie Cogan, Brad Pitt, who works for the infamous Dylan, Sam Shepard, a crotchety type currently suffering from debilitating health issues. Because Jackie personally knows one of the responsible parties, he contracts Mickey, James Gandolfini, much to the chagrin of the driver, Richard Jenkins, who must seek approval for all of Cogan's budgetary issues from the people in charge, to help complete the job. Dominik cites Peter Yates' underrated 1973 Robert Mitchum star The Friends of Eddie Coyle as the originating inspiration, motivating him to explore other novels by George V. Higgins, who wrote that source novel, which lead him to stumble on Higgins-Cogan's trade. Dominik's modernization of Higgins' novel, however, tends to make every obvious 2008 reference seem anachronistic, creating a sort of ragged resistance for the unsubtle modern-day woes to tether into the brassy underworld landscape. Just as Yates' film opened to less than satisfactory box office results, Killing Them Softly has weathered critical lashing since its premiere earlier this year, despite headlining aging heartthrob Brad Pitt, reuniting with Dominik after their 2007 critical success The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Dominik's crime flick is more of an anti-thriller, instead taking on the capacity of a mean-spirited character study. But whereas Mitchum was our titular protagonist of Yates, here, we're given a stained composite of America, standing in as a never-seen femme fatale, an uber-bitch siren that leads men into her sanctum where they struggle in futility, until they expire, like moths singeing themselves on the cruel glass of the heated light bulb. We certainly never get beyond the surface of Pitt's not completely uncaring Jackie Cogan, who prefers to kill his targets softly, from a distance, so as not to be tainted by the emotion of it all. His fear of emotion, in fact, gives us the highlight of the second half of the film, where we get a down-and-out James Gandolfini as a has-been East Coast hitman, flown in to kill one of the targets that Pitt knows personally. But even as the first half of the film, which engenders genre rules, giving us an intense heist sequence which ripples into small bursts of excessive and beautifully photographed violence, Killing Them Softly pulls a bait-and-switch, and turns into an arduous exercise spinning endlessly around the notion of money. The last time star Brad Pitt and writer-director Andrew Dominik teamed up was for the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. That film is a long, slow burn, drifting in and out of scenes, dreamlike at times. Despite the gradual, deliberate pace, there is a force behind the narrative. Their latest endeavor, Killing Them Softly, an adaptation of George V. Higgins' novel Cogan's Trade, aims for the same goal. This time, however, they miss the mark, and instead of a steady, measured tempo, the film sags and meanders. It goes nowhere, and in the end, even though the story reaches the only logical conclusion, it peters out and leaves you empty. That's not to say that Killing Them Softly is bad. There are truly incredible elements, the performances are wonderful, and Dominik has a knack for creating moments of violence that are stunning and beautiful. One in particular is like a poetic, slow-motion dance of bullets, blood, and broken glass. It's all of this potential that makes the movie feel like more of a failure than it really is. In all honesty, Killing Them Softly is pretty good, but pretty good doesn't cut it when you see what could have been. When two low-level hoods, Frankie, Scoot McNairy, and Russell, Ben Mendelsohn, knock over a mob-protected card game, it kicks off a series of unfortunate events for them. The higher-ups call in enforcer Jackie Cogan, Brad Pitt, to set things straight and get things moving again. What follows is a unique, introspective take on a crime story. There are conversations, discussions of feelings, multiple angles, and a number of intersecting stories. Part of the problem is that Killing Them Softly never really belongs to anyone. Based on a novel Cogan's Trade, you can't be blamed for assuming that Jackie Cogan is the main character. And, you know, Brad Pitt's name is up in lights everywhere, so why not? Pitt is fantastic as Cogan. He's tough, efficient, and funny, but smart and ruthless, approaching his craft like a strategy game, already planning his next move before he's even finished his last. His exchanges with the faint-hearted, ineffectual mob middleman, Richard Jenkins, are great. Still, he doesn't feel like the center of the movie, and though you like him, you never get enough character to truly root for him. The film starts out with Frankie and his junky Australian cohort Russell, and you think it's going to be their story. And at time it is, but then the film wanders off. I'm all for tangents and asides and subplots, but the amount of screen time taken up by maudlin, self-pitying rambling of imported hitman Mickey, James Gandolfini, is a continual frustration. Wounded, drunk, and overly sensitive, Mickey expounds, at great length, about random uninteresting topics, like a hunting trip gone awry, his crumbling marriage, and a hooker he loved in Florida. That's all well and good, if you only cared at all about anything he has to say. It's in moments like these that Killing Them Softly comes apart, and where the pace falters. You know they can do this type of side story right, because Ray Liotta has a similarly small part as the guy whose card games keep getting knocked over. He's as good as he's been in years, but is both memorable and vital to the story in multiple ways. Where the film is strongest is in the scenes with Pitt and Jenkins, those with McNairy and Mendelsohn, and McNairy and Pitt. McNairy is amazing, he's the heart of the movie, and hijacks every scene he's in. In a heroin-fueled haze, Frankie questions Russell about who he may have told about their heist, trying to figure out if he needs to run for his life or not. Both fade in and out of consciousness and the narrative like a dream, and the result is one of the best scenes I've seen in a movie this year. Killing Them Softly really should be Frankie's movie. He's a blend of cocky, who gives a shit attitude, and sheer, please don't kill me terror. But again, just when you're beginning to engage, to really start to care, the film moves onto another thread, and by the time you return, that momentum is lost. If the film was just Frankie's, and by extension, Russell's, story, I would have been completely satisfied. Those two are perfect together on screen. Russell is such an incredible scumbag that at one point he's literally covered head to toe in dog shit, just hanging out like nothing is out of the ordinary. Their relationship serves as a launching pad for a twisted sense of gallows humor. coupled with the derision Kogan and the middlemen cast upon their superiors, who rule by committee because, like politicians, no one wants to be the one to make the unpopular decision. Killing them softly is, at least initially, way funnier than you expect it to be. From the very first frames, there's also an awkward undercurrent of politics and economics, and they're trying to set the whole film up as a mirror to current political climate. But this route is a clunky misstep that never amounts to much. In the end, that's a metaphor for the whole film. It's fun and interesting at times, but ultimately you wonder, what's the point? While many worshipped it as the heralding of a distinct new directorial talent, the assassination of Jesse James was something of a confounding delight for others. Where Andrew Dominik's Chopper was an irreverent cult crowd-pleaser, his eventual follow-up was a drawn-out, elegiac take on the revisionist Western that was lush to look at and featured a star-making turn from a mesmeric Casey Affleck, but left some unsure of its real value as an engaging piece of cinema. Again casting his Jesse James lead Brad Pitt in another career-bolstering turn, it's hard to think of any other mainstream actor who's grown so effortlessly into their abilities along with their looks. Dominik returns to the crime genre with an adaptation of George V. Higgins' then-pertinent 70s novel Kogan's Trade. Updated to take blatant potshots at America's current political meltdown, whether the film is successful as an adaptation or as a piece of commentary will depend on your patience for being lectured. When low-rent robbers Frankie and Russell are put up to ripping off a gangster gambling den, fingers are pointed left, right and center, not least at host Marky, who's fessed up to holding up his own game before. Hired hitman Kogan is brought in to sort out the bloody mess and appease the local mobsters, but his refined ways of business ruffle feathers with his employers and are threatened by his tactical deployment of old pal Mickey, who has become an unreliable drunk. With the recession biting hard even at these ruthless villains' heels, everyone is in it for themselves and cares only about the bottom line, but not many of them will be around long enough to enjoy their payday. Opening with generously lengthy scenes of crowd-pleasing, expectation-building banter between Scoot Monsters McNairy and Animal Kingdom's Ben Mendelsohn, Dominik reels the audience in with the setup of a too-good-to-be-true heist that exploits the boy who cried wolf legend to dramatic effect. The persecution of Ray Liotta's Fall Guy is played successfully for broad laughs, and the coarse, loose exchanges between McNairy and Mendelsohn really showcase these promising actors at their peak, despite occasional diversions into unnecessarily silly, almost stonerish humor. As the screws tighten though, the bracing script grows darkly unforgiving, with prolonged scenes of wince-inducing violence jolting the viewer out of their safety zone, and this is before Brad Pitt's straight-talking but enigmatic death dealer has even turned up. Flying in the face of all this good work, a near-constant chorus of political contextualizing threatens to bury the film from the start under the weight of its own pretension. Obama has nearly as much monologue as the characters do dialogue, and the parallels Dominik is at pains to present may leave more savvy viewers feeling patronized and the average punter pissed off at the distraction. It often robs key scenes of their sense of realism to have radios in hoodlums' cars and TVs in dive bars blaring out speeches in the background. Would these guys really have been bothered about Obama's inauguration? And sometimes diffuses the narrative momentum by forcing the viewer to figure out what the script is trying to say. Annoyingly ironic and overly obvious song selections also, but in at crucial moments, overstaying their welcome in a desperate bid to remind the viewer what they should be feeling and thinking. Surely Johnny Cash's The Man Comes Around has had its cinematic due already? It can feel like being browbeaten by the thugs who put poor Ray Liotta through such misery in the vain hope of admission. Eventually most viewers will want to stand up and shout, "Okay, we get it. Now get on with the movie." Which is a real shame, as Brad Pitt's character and performance say as much as the film needs to about good ol' America. His memorable debates with Richard Jenkins are pleasingly barbed, as he describes how he likes to kill softly, from a distance, without bringing feelings into the picture, before taking part in some of the most nauseatingly close quarters and protracted kills of recent memory. Kogan's behavior makes it impossible not to think of the hypocrisy of U.S. foreign policy and warmongering, making for a sharp indictment as well as a fascinatingly amoral character. Pitt counteracts all the nastiness with real movie star charisma, but also a weight and gravitas that shows his character may be a monster who's well aware of his wrongdoings, but even he is sickened by the comparative weaknesses of those around him. The script and Kogan's rants make a case for self-sufficiency as the only reasonable alternative to the fallacy of the all-embracing American dream, with Pitt such a strong, near-invincible presence that he almost sells this notion, but for the crucial denial of humanity that it essentially necessitates. Disappointingly, women have no real place in this world. The only female presence is a back-talking hooker who only exists in one brief scene to give James Gandolfini the excuse to spout audience-baiting obscenity. Actually, maybe it's a blessing in disguise that women are left out of this sordid underbelly. The fates of some of the best characters are dealt with so flippantly as to be frustrating. No Country for Old Men has a lot to answer for, while the spectacularly gore-speckled demises of others feel gratuitous since the victims have been drawn so sketchily. A centerpiece CGI-assisted slow-mo assassination feels even more excessive than Zack Snyder's trademark indulgences, the nagging soundtrack and sense of abject nihilism again defusing any potential suspense the scene might have mustered. Wrapping up with Kogan's bitterly straight-faced tirade against his own country that was delivered more subversively by Sacha Baron Cohen and The Dictator, Dominik's cash-grubbing protagonists are ultimately impossible to care for, in part because of their relentless, recession-fueled dollar fixation. Tellingly, the most appealing protagonists are also the most flawed human beings, from Scoot McNairy and Ben Mendelsohn's sympathetically bumbling crooks to James Gandolfini's alcoholic hitman obsessing over prostitutes while overwhelmed by a midlife crisis that has left him impotent to his trade. These characters are initially given enough time for us to invest in them, but the narrative deals them a bit of a bum hand. A little paring and pruning could easily have emphasized their roles and made the film seem more enjoyable overall. It's hard not to recommend Killing Them Softly, as there is plenty of Tarantino-esque vim to its icy world of contracts and crims, but the mix of styles and muddled message ultimately robbed the film of greatness. Dominik's showy direction can be as jarring as early Aronofsky, but the over-egged approach is less appropriate here than it was in the likes of Requiem for a Dream, which this film occasionally references, albeit in humorous fashion. Despite the wattage of its stars and scene-stealing performances from a couple of rising talents, Dominik's sophomore effort will perhaps find itself in the same pickle as his previous film, critically admired but too opaque for the multiplex and wanky even by art house standards. It's too cold to connect with and too prickly to love. Sometimes a film ends up feeling smaller than the sum of its parts, and that is the case with Killing Them Softly, the new film from Andrew Dominik, the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Finely acted, frequently funny, and stylishly directed, Killing Them Softly nonetheless ultimately fails to satisfy. Its story is too slight, its characters are too familiar, and its stakes are too small. An adaptation of George V. Higgins' 1974 crime novel Kogan's Trade, Killing Them Softly is set on the seamiest side of the Boston underworld. This is not the milieu of powerful mob kingpins, but of low-level operatives and low-life thugs, and it is in realizing this working-class wasteland that the film succeeds most admirably. Frankie, Scoot McNairy, and Russell, Ben Mendelsohn, are two wretches at the lowest end of this criminal food chain, who are enlisted to knock over a poker game run for the mob by a man named Marky Ray Liotta. Marky has a history of robbing his own games, so Frankie and Russell, neither of them great thinkers, believe that the blame fall on him. Soon, however, middle management mobster Richard Jenkins has enlisted hitman Jackie Kogan, Brad Pitt, to deal with the situation. Pitt, Jenkins, and James Gandolfini, as a backup hitman Kogan brings in, all give excellent performances, though none of the actors is asked to stretch particularly far from type. Dominik's direction is impressive, but he is more effective in the quieter and straightforwardly gritty scenes than in some of the more self-consciously stylish pieces he stages. One shooting and car crash sequence lingers so long over its balletic slow-mo violence that it seems to become genre self-parody, and a conversation between two heroin-saturated individuals that fades in and out of coherence just becomes annoying. The main problem with Killing Them Softly is that the stakes are too small. The plot is so simple and unsurprising that we wonder why Pitt's coolly efficient fixer was even needed to deal with this situation, and Dominik's characters don't evoke sufficient emotional investment to make up for the too familiar story. We do not, ultimately, care whether Frankie and Russell live or die any more than Pitt's pragmatic hitman does. This lack of emotional concern is one of the themes of the film. America is a business, Pitt's character says, but this bleakly unsentimental worldview is not interesting enough to make up for the absence of characters about whom we might actually care. The worst part is, Dominik seems to know that there's no there in his story, and so, to compensate, he makes the disastrous choice to set Higgins' 1974 tale in the months leading up to the 2008 presidential election, and to provide a running commentary through newscasts and radio reports about the financial crisis. This heavy-handed attempt to tie the minor crimes of these characters to a vague critique of unfeeling capitalism feels tacked on and underdeveloped. It comes across as a small, sadly shallow film making a desperate, and failed, bid for relevancy and broader significance. And it's a pity, because it feels like there was a good, smart movie to be made from this spare, cynical tale, if only Dominik had abandoned his overreaching pretensions and focused on making us care about the characters who get chewed up and spit out by this unfeeling world. As it is, though the talent involved in this film might have produced a modern classic, Killing Them Softly ultimately amounts to little more than a minor diversion. Killing Them Softly is a methodical slow-burn crime thriller, graphic spurts of violence interspersed between memorably acerbic stretches of dialogue-rich character exchanges. Writer-director Andrew Dominik, 2007's The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, adapting for the new millennium the novel Cogan's Trade by George V. Higgins, isn't exactly shy about his intentions. Whereas most films of this ilk might feature an underlying thematic thread complementing and running parallel to the main storyline, Dominik lays his cynicism out in the open for all to see from the very beginning, opening credits and music fit for a horror movie portentously stuck between shots of a trash-riddled landscape, presidential change billboards, and sound bites of a not-yet-elected Barack Obama speaking about the potential for a new, all-for-one America. George W. Bush and Obama pop up throughout on televisions and radios, their voices loud and clear as they discuss the country's financial woes. Meanwhile, the ne'er-do-wells on view living in a stark, perpetually overcast New Orleans are doing whatever they can to make a few bucks, breaking the law and getting themselves into water too hot to escape from. It's all rather self-indulgent and certainly on the nose. Even Dominik himself would have to agree with this, but also knows how to keep the viewer's attention. It starts by grabbing for the jugular, instructed by boss Johnny Amato, Vincent Curatola, small-time hoods Frankie, Scoot McNairy, and Russell, Ben Mendelsohn, rob a mob-protected card game. They believe at first that they've gotten away with it, not yet realizing that they've set into motion contracts out for all three of their lives. Calm, collected enforcer Jackie Cogan, Brad Pitt, comes to town to make sure the hits go off as planned, enlisting Florida-based hired killer Mickey, James Gandolfini, for the job. Mickey arrives, all right, but he's a mess, so preoccupied by booze and hookers he can't be trusted to correctly get things done. With no one else to turn to, Jackie takes matters into his own hands, leaving a trail of blood as grisly as his nerves are smooth as silk. Killing Them Softly, which refers to Jackie's preferred method of murder, standing back from the crime rather than personally getting involved with the victims-to-be, is the opposite of subtle when it comes to its mayhem and carnage, scenes of bullets protruding through skin and brain matter being blown to bits coming one of two ways: dirty, unexpected, and sudden, or rendered morbidly artful via balletic slow motion. Director Andrew Dominik reminds of an early career version of the Coen brothers in his ability to bring unlikely dark humor to the fold, as well as an enduring hold on his mise-en scene. Loved the oral use of the rattling generator out back during Frankie's and Russell's initial robbery. Caustic bits of comedy, some of it observational, much of it absurdist, thoroughly tingles with rhythmic immediacy, from Frankie's and Russell's conversations about sex, to Russell's fatigued, heroin-fueled tripping, to Mickey's unapologetically excessive living as he chatters with Jackie. Brad Pitt, 2011's Moneyball, makes for a cold, calculating, yet somehow even-keeled and charming Cogan, a man who knows what needs to get done and isn't going to let anything get in the way of his finished business. In a film that is treated more as an ensemble than a star piece, Scoot McNairy, 2012's Argo, and Ben Mendelsohn, 2012's The Dark Knight Rises, are just as prominently featured as Frankie and Russell, clumsy criminals who have gotten mixed up with the wrong guys. McNairy and Mendelsohn are so believable in their roles it is as if Dominik snatched them off the actual streets of Louisiana. Disappearing behind a colorful character whose part is, if anything, a red herring, James Gandolfini, 2009's The Taking of Pelham 123, is deliciously profane as Mickey, a belligerent screw-up who manages to still be as likable as a little boy who hasn't quite figured out right from wrong. Ray Liotta, 2009's Observe and Report, also gets some strong moments, and two of the picture's most bone-crushingly violent, as Marky Trapman, an unlucky card shark who gets incorrectly fingered as a participant in the robbery. Killing Them Softly uses soundtrack cues well, though arguably overplayed in movies. Johnny Cash's The Man Comes Around makes for a vivid introduction to Brad Pitt's Jackie, while Cliff Edwards' cover of Nat King Cole's It's Only a Paper Moon is taken superbly. Unsettling advantage of near the end, and Greg Fraser's 2012's Snow White and the Huntsman, grimy cinematography is intercut with sparks of acidly beautiful inspiration. In addition, the movie is stylistically punchy, and Jackie's concluding monologue, angrily speaking against Obama's election speech as it happens in front of him on the television, is nothing if not scathingly blunt. Taken all together, Killing Them Softly is too obvious for its own good, the narrative filled with stops and starts as it loses interest in its plot on numerous occasions and heads off on tangents based more on Dominik's interest in listening to his own words than storytelling necessity. His points are succinct, but only marginally convincing. Whether the country is in a financial crisis or not, there are always going to be thugs out there looking for ways to get money without having to earn it. It is best, then, to view the film as an unapologetic thriller about people digging their own graves. By the end, most are lying in them, and it doesn't seem as if anyone's going to miss them. Before he became an author of crime fiction, George V. Higgins served as a professor, lawyer, and in various governmental positions where he investigated organized crime. As a result, his subsequent writing became renowned for his dialogue's authenticity in lengthy and gritty conversations between wise guys and lowlifes. This is readily apparent in his first novel, The Friends of Eddie Coyle, which made an excellent 1973 film starring Robert Mitchum, and also Killing Them Softly, Australian writer-director Andrew Dominik's adaptation of Higgins' third novel from 1974, originally called Cogan's Trade. In rediscovering Higgins' crime stories, Dominik has made an instant American crime classic that also boasts cutting political overtones. Updated from the author's 1970s set Boston crime circles and repositioned within post-Katrina New Orleans in 2008, Dominik's film of lusciously staged violence and absorbingly protracted exchanges of dialogue contains a commentary that might dismay the unyieldingly patriotic, but nonetheless makes a significant mark on the crime genre. Dominik, the Australian filmmaker behind 2000's Chopper and 2007's exceptional The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, presents an underworld inspection that could just as easily serve as a look into the false sense of community and economic corruption in America. The story opens with offenders Frankie, Scoot McNairy, and the wretched Russell, Ben Mendelsohn, meeting with Squirrel, Vincent Curatola, a washed-up veteran with a scheme and in need of two low-level crooks. They're to raid a regular illegal card game run by Marky Trotman, Ray Liotta, and no one should suspect them because Marky once robbed his own game and got away with it. Everyone turned a blind eye the first time, although now, when Frankie and Russell hold up Marky's players, his criminal clientele will assume he's gone too far and robbed his own game for a second time. But after the successful heist, the corporate mob sends Jackie Cogan, Brad Pitt, to assess the circumstances and restore order, his preparations requiring approval from a higher authority communicated through a middleman mob spokesman, Richard Jenkins. Though everyone supposes, correctly, that Marky wouldn't be stupid enough to rob his own game twice, Marky receives a nasty and needless beating just to maintain face, needless because Jackie knows they'll ask him to kill Marky eventually anyway, so why put him through the agony of physical punishment? To help with the cleanup, Jackie enlists the heavy-drinking, hard-whoring, out-of-his-prime hitman Mickey, James Gandolfini, to assist with taking out the sweaty smackhead Russell, whose acquaintance with Jackie would complicate his execution. Mickey's the kind of unrelenting hard case where you get the sense that if Russell knew Mickey, it wouldn't matter to Mickey one bit. The scenes between Pitt and Gandolfini stand on their own as brilliantly isolated and complex, with Mickey spewing out his angry-at-the-world bile in wonderfully acted monologues as courteous Jackie waits in calm disbelief and hushed frustration. Pitt's pure on-screen magnetism accounts for the power of his role. Dominik arranges Killing Them Softly like a Quentin Tarantino film, with involved, lovingly long sequences of rich dialogue interrupted by occasional smatterings of plot and extreme bloody violence. Like Tarantino, Dominik's style might be considered self-indulgent if it weren't for his film being so intelligent and expertly crafted. Every moment demonstrates Dominik's directorial acumen, his use of slow motion and a stellar soundtrack making the film, in a sense, an exercise in a controlled style. One execution, shown in super slow-mo, features raindrops easing downscreen and crashing into the discharged shells from an automatic pistol as the bullets penetrate a car window, glass, and the victim's head burst, shattering in imagery both startling and somehow beautiful. In another sequence, Russell's fuzzy heroin-nodding consciousness blurs his sound and vision into a shrinking tunnel of comically skewed perceptions. Set to a blend of old-timey 1930s hits and the more modern cool of Johnny Cash and the Velvet Underground, the film's atmosphere permeates with the same stylized self-assurance that makes Crime Pictures by Brian De Palma, The Untouchables, Carlito's Way, or Danny Boyle, Shallow Grave, Trainspotting, so masterful. In the background are talk radio and cable newscasts jabbering on about America's economic crisis, and presidential candidate Barack Obama makes optimistic speeches about American unity. There are mainline analogies at work, such as Markey being the single corrupt bank taking the fall for a broken institution after George W. Bush's administration deregulates home loans, which is equivalent to robbery from crooks here. But not every character represents a political figure or aspect of American economics. Rather than a small-time crime syndicate signifying America, consider instead the reflectivity of American politics, economics, and crime as universally corrupt equivalents in a negligent capitalist society. Dominik's inclusion of television and radio commentary in the background cannot be overlooked. It's openly apparent in the story's setting and a thematic linchpin until it works its way into the foreground in the last scene. A final conversation between Pitt and Jenkins occurs where, after attacking Thomas Jefferson's hypocrisy, Pitt delivers a brutal last line in a monologue bound to be quoted from here on out. In another way, Killing Them Softly is less a portrait of American capitalism than a contention about an American attitude that prevails up and down, from the powers that be to the lowest common denominators like Frankie and Russell. "I live in America," says Jackie. "And in America, you're on your own." Smart ones like Jackie know that for most to live in America is about survival, and to survive in such an environment, you must jealously play the game, but play it carefully. Some, like Jenkins' character, find themselves caught up in the American dream, whereas Mickey loses sight of himself in the widespread excesses available to those who achieve said dream. Dominik has made a sly motion picture filled with style and substance, and one of the best crime pictures in recent memory. Although it's bound to be divisive for its unconventional structure, ruthless tone, and the cynical nature of its message, Killing Them Softly is a rare, exceedingly enjoyable, bleakly comic noir story that also happens to have strains of something more. The film centers around two losers, Frankie and Russell, who rob a mob poker game hosted by Markey, Liotta. Markey has robbed one of his own games in the past and pocketed the money, but he is well liked and was forgiven. Insert Jackie, Pitt, a hitman who is called to help handle this situation. That's all I can give you without divulging some interesting plot twists. One thing to note is the political nature of this movie. Speeches from George W. Bush and Barack Obama are seen and heard in the background, and occasionally the camera will pan by a billboard for the 2008 presidential election. It's important to note this movie takes place in 2008 during the financial crisis, and it serves as an emphasis to the financial crisis that hits the mob when the poker game is robbed. Killing Them Softly is not a fast-paced shoot-'em-up movie. It's much, much slower than you'd think, and I would place it in the slice-of-life category. Combine that with the background politics and it's easy to see how some people would be disappointed with the movie. If people go into this movie and accept what it gives, I think it would receive more favorable reviews. The scene where Frankie and Russell rob the mobsters is very tense and I held my breath. Can you imagine being a lowly criminal and pointing a gun at 12-plus seasoned mob guys while your heroin-addicted buddy slowly collects the money? Another great scene is when Jackie makes good on a hit. He's in the passenger seat of a car, and the car rolls up next to the car of his victim. Jackie fires his shots and the scene goes into slow motion. The gun firing, the bullets moving in the air, the glass shattering, and the bullets hitting the body is melodic and frightening at the same time. I enjoyed this movie once I stopped thinking about what I wanted it to be. Gandolfini gave an awesome performance as a washed-up hitman, and Richard Jenkins was a nice addition as the driver. The last time Brad Pitt and Andrew Dominik worked together, it resulted in the tremendous 2007 neo-western The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. So what would happen second time around, when they were to reunite for a latter-day gangster movie set in the shadow of the handover of America from President George W. Bush to Barack Obama in 2008? After the rarefied assassination, with its rich period detail and earthy palette, Killing Them Softly seems rather gray and even ordinary. It bypasses the last 20 years of post-Tarantino gangster movies to recall David Mamet's 1975 play American Buffalo, itself a meditation on recession-era crime and punishment. The Mamet-like dialogue is the most telling example of what's not quite right. Dominik has a cast of excellent American actors here, but most seem to be in service to a script that isn't quite as sharp and perceptive as it thinks it is. Music, and sound itself, is a secondary problem. Throughout the film, TV sets blast out bulletins from rolling news channels, providing a crude running commentary on the larger world. The music choices, the Velvet Underground's Heroin for a Narcotic State, are equally clunky. Surprisingly, then, killing them softly does, just about, work. Key to this is yet another superb turn from Pitt, playing another of his indignant outsider anti-heroes, movie star cool, noir thriller weary and yet driven by something recognizable and psychologically real. It's Pitt who sells this movie as he navigates the mess he's been brought into, a world where gangsters rob their own illegal card games just for a laugh, and where hired hitmen, once the samurai-like loners of bygone days, have become flabby, broken down, unreliable losers. Killing them softly doesn't quite know what it's about. There should be more to it, and though it achieves more in failing than most movies do in succeeding, it's just sad to report that it says as little about the present, complex state of America as it does. The only hope for us genre-loving folk comes in blood and guts gangster films, one of the few genre movies that are allowed to be treated seriously. We can thank The Godfather for that. This year's entry in arty gangster fare is Killing Them Softly, a movie by Australian export Andrew Dominik, who turned the life of Aussie mass-murdering madman Mark Red into a sadistic dark comedy in Chopper, which also led directly to Eric Bana being cast as the Hulk, but we can't blame Dominik for that, and then made the underrated, yet undeniably pretentious western The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. The secret to realizing that one is pretentious lies in the ludicrously long title. Now the man who likes to stage violence with the artful precision of a gallery artist is back with a new movie starring Brad Pitt that strives to slather layers of meaning onto a pulpy tale. It's a blood-soaked gangster yarn loosely and forcefully tied into the current international economic crisis for smarty pants bonus points. The movie is uneven, but certainly the work of a filmmaker with enough talent to deliver something resembling a hard-edged masterpiece one of these days. This one just isn't it. Brad Pitt stars as an impossibly pretty hitman. They really should have given him a scar or something to downplay the People magazine angle, who is brought into a depressed crime community to set things straight. Those running the crime syndicate are broke, and the old face-smashing ways have been replaced by uptight accountants with guns struggling to keep some sort of cash flow kicking. The depressed low-life economy always gets together for card games to share the wealth/destroy some wallets, and is run by Ray Liotta in pathetic pusher mode. Liotta has such fiscal trouble himself that he once robbed his own card game for extra cash and received the expected kick to the head punishment. Two particularly pathetic hoods/drug addicts, Ben Mendelsohn and Scoot McNairy, decide to rob his game knowing Liotta will get the blame. That's when Pitt is brought in to set things straight. He punishes Liotta, but knows he's not really responsible. So Pitt digs around, finds out who did it, and convinces his mob contact/hilariously uptight accountant, Richard Jenkins, who recently punished the pesky kids of Cabin in the Woods, to bring in James Gandolfini's button man to get things done. Of course, things are so bad for the entire mob community that the former heavyweight killer Gandolfini is so depressed he can't even leave the comfort of his hotel room/favorite hookers. So Pitt has to do all the dirty dealings himself, if only so he can be the only person in this whole mess to get paid. So, as you can probably gather, this isn't your usual Tony Montana-style joys of being evil gangster romp. Nope, this might be the saddest and most pathetic group of gangsters to ever strut their stuff across a big screen. It's also a very realistic side of the world rarely seen on screen. While the likes of Liotta and Gandolfini might bring their gangster star baggage with them, that's primarily a misdirection tactic by Dominik. He uses their images to make you expect heroics, only to show that even the stars of this crime world are pathetic failures. It gives Liotta and Gandolfini a chance to deliver their finest work in years, dropping all of their usual macho posturing to create truly damaged human beings that are deeper than any character they've played in a while. Ben Mendelsohn and Scoot McNairy are even better as the sad heroin-addled deadbeats who kick off the whole bloody tragedy. They look, sound, and feel like people who just wandered out of a methadone clinic desperate for cash and a fix, and will dig into your sympathies despite being terrible people. On the more stylized side of the spectrum, Jenkins plays a hilarious figurehead for the new numbers-crunching mob as big business, while Brad Pitt takes on a classic man with no name cold killer role, delivering a larger-than-life movie type that still fits into Dominik's depressing reality. The filmmaker himself is a star in the movie, delivering a stylized and gorgeous movie aesthetic that heightens without ever undermining his carefully constructed sad reality. His use of violence is disgusting and shocking, stripping gangster movies of any sense of heroics. Had the movie played the story straight and let the connection between the depressed crime movie economy and the current global recession economy, Killing Them Softly could have been a nice and nasty slice of hard-boiled crime fiction with an intellectual edge. Unfortunately, the director is a bit too enamored with his social commentary and hammers that connection home hard through constant radio and TV footage of the lovable George W. and Obama discussing the recession and empty promises of hope during the 2008 election. Dominik essentially rubs his audience's face in the subtext like a puppy in need of poopy punishment, and it gets obnoxious quickly with no relief. Thankfully, it's not a problem so overwhelming as to destroy the film, but it's certainly annoying enough to detract from the enjoyment. The filmmaker carefully paced and constructed a 90-minute slice of depressed mobster doom that would be a great dark crime drama without all of the overplayed recession connections. That's probably just a result of Dominik being angry with America after coming to Hollywood on a gravy train after Chopper, only to struggle with penny-pinching execs and releasing an unfairly mangled Jesse James epic. There's nothing wrong with a director making pulp personal, you just have to balance the artistic aspirations with the required button-pushing entertainment. Dominik tipped the scale a little too far in the wrong direction this time, but Killing Them Softly still proves he's a filmmaker with skill, talent, and ambition that I'm certain he will fully realize one of these days. Movies about assassins generally show them as ascetic samurai loners, broodingly dismantling and reconstructing their weapons as they wait for the hit in monkish seclusion, chain-smoking, keeping small talk to a minimum with their employers, who are in a similar laconic state, and who, in any case, may be secretly awed by their hitman's icy professionalism. Killing Them Softly is different. This killer, Kogan, played by Brad Pitt, is relaxed and talkative. He is craggy, leonine, casual and imperious, absolutely on top of his game, but with a flaw. He cannot kill anyone he's met, and hates to kill up close, squeamish about them begging for mercy. So he has to murder at a distance. It's what he calls killing them softly, though without acknowledging Roberta Flack. Kogan is part antihero, part chivalric observer, terrifically acted by Pitt in this compelling movie from Andrew Dominik, the director who made Chopper, 2000, and The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 2007. He has adapted the 1974 crime novel Kogan's Trade by George V. Higgins and updated it to the America of 2008, the era of financial meltdown and political changeover. When I first saw this at Cannes this year, I found some of the overtly satirical moments too emphatic. The TV news on in the background will persistently give us Bush or Obama at ironic moments. But maybe the film's politics are part of its swaggering insolence. It is a violent ensemble nightmare of middle management mobster incompetence in the tradition of Goodfellas, Pulp Fiction, Casino, and TV's The Sopranos. The drama is thrillingly and casually pessimistic, a world of weary tough guys complaining about having to clear up the mess left by other screw-ups, and for less money than they'd hoped for. This is a stiflingly and reekingly unhappy male world. Dominik deploys two classic tropes. From Pulp Fiction, there is the royale with cheese banal pre-violence conversation, and the classic gangster betrayal misdirection, which I associate with the build-up to Tommy DeVito's made guy ceremony from Goodfellas. Someone gets shot, suddenly and at close range, having been lulled along with the audience into a false sense of security by a chat about what they were going to do later. The political dimension comes in two parts. In 2008, U.S. taxpayers were asked to bail out banks for the sake of confidence and prestige, and these taxpayers also had to tighten their belts. Here, local wise guy Marky, Ray Liotta, has to be whacked for robbing some other wise guy's poker game. He didn't do it, but someone has to be seen to get killed for the sake of confidence and prestige, and hitmen have to accept a reduced fee in the economic climate. Kogan is contracted by an anonymous apparatchik played by Richard Jenkins, whose own criminal superiors are as cautious as any of the suits in corporate America. Their paralysis is another symptom of the economic times. The robbery was actually done by two ridiculous jerks, Frankie and Russell, superbly played by Scoot McNairy and Ben Mendelsohn, whose boss must also now be whacked. This is Johnny Squirrel Amato, played by Vincent Curatola. But Kogan subcontracts this wet job, and here is where Dominik shows how Kogan is guilty of sentimental incompetence. He gives the work to his old friend Mickey, hilariously played by James Gandolfini, who to Kogan's polite dismay, shows himself to be nowadays unequal to the task of contract killing, a heavy drinker and prostitute addict who is morosely in unrequited love with one of the girls he despises. Mickey exhibits the undignified emotions Kogan hates in his own victims. Could it be that Mickey, poor Mickey, is the endgame those in the business face? If they survive, that is. He is their future, in worse shape than anything in the morgue. Crime equals chaos in killing them softly. It's a reminder of what Tom Wolfe wrote: criminals are not romantic desperados who go outside the law to get what they want. They are ruthless, greedy, stupid people who get themselves into a progressively worsening, violent mess. There is an entropy in killing them softly, a spiraling down. Every scene, with its quarreling and its bitching, its bantering and its blood splattering, is not leading anywhere as such. It's just an open-ended vivisectional demonstration of unhappiness and confusion. Dominik gives Pitt his grandstanding moment in terms of one satirical aria of a speech, contrived perhaps, and its moral drawing jars with the icy amorality of all that has gone before. But it is delivered with such angrily dismissive power. This is an unrepentantly cynical take on the hope and change promised to the US in 2008. This year's election race makes it look even bleaker, an icily confident black comedy of continued disillusion. You think it's gonna be just another hitman action movie. Look, it's Brad Pitt with slicked back hair and an evil goatee and a shotgun. And it's called Killing Them Softly, fair Pete sake, so maybe Brad's gonna be some sort of philosophical hitman or something, but that's as far as it'll go, right? But then you learn it's from writer-director Andrew Dominik, the guy who made the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which also sounded like it was gonna be kick-ass and bloody but instead turned out to be a cool, dreamy meditation on celebrity. Dominik pulls that trick again, turns a very American mythology of crime and violence in on itself, and from that inversion yanks out a mirror with which to show us a startling reflection of America. The image shining darkly from Killing Them Softly is not very flattering, and some might be tempted to dismiss it, because Dominik is an outsider, a New Zealand-born Australian. Then again, his perspective isn't clouded by visions of mom, baseball, and apple pie, so could be he's worth listening to. To be sure, there's plenty that's plain funny or thrilling or clever or all three all at once in the skeleton upon which Dominik burnishes his mirror. Two of the dumbest armed robbers ever, Scoot McNairy, Argo, Monsters, and Ben Mendelsohn, The Dark Knight Rises, Killer Elite, managed to steal a ton of dough from a mob-protected poker game run by Marky, Ray Liotta. The details: Charlie St. Cloud, who has had his own troubles with his mob bosses in the past. This heist, despite its success, involves multiple levels of idiocy and bad planning, and is itself a near parody of the sorts of crime thrillers that power the rush they provide from the intricacies and the ingenuity of their construction. And then Pitt's Happy Feet 2, Moneyball, Jackie, the enforcer the local mob brings in to deal with the miscreants, enters, with his smooth philosophy about the least unpleasant ways to take out assholes who desperately deserve it and a few well-aimed swipes at dumb armed robbers. If Killing Them Softly were just a straight-up crime drama, it'd work on that basis alone. Maybe the book Cogan's Trade, by respected Moore novelist George V. Higgins, upon which this is based, does work on that basis alone. It certainly cannot be about what Dominik's version of it is about, because the book was published in 1974, and Higgins himself died in 1999, and softly wraps its criminal enterprise up in a metaphor about the 2008 financial crash. Seriously. And what's more, the metaphor works brilliantly, even if it's a tad heavy-handed about it. Jackie strides slow-mo through rundown semi-abandoned American neighborhoods. Cogan's Trade is set in Boston, and the film was shot in New Orleans, but the on-screen location is never specified, and Dominik creates a sense of anywhere America, and there in the audio background is Obama waxing rhapsodic about change. There in the visual background is an Obama Hope billboard, a weathered, torn-up Obama Hope billboard, as if right from the get-go, there was no hope in the offing, no change to come. For this bitter, cynical tale is set in the autumn of 2008, during the presidential campaign that Obama would go on to win, and with news about global economic collapse underscoring every scene set in a car or a bar where there's a radio or a television blaring a talking head. This is a story about a small-scale local economy that has collapsed because the players have lost confidence in the system. Who wants to engage in high-stakes poker if the games aren't safe from the most obvious sorts of thieves? This underground economy has shut down, money is not moving. So conversations must be had between Jackie and his intermediary with the mob, a bland nameless bureaucrat, Richard Jenkins, The Cabin in the Woods, Eat Pray Love, about how confidence can be restored by a sufficiently widespread application of punishment meted out at the wrongdoers, not just the actual wrongdoers but the ones perceived to have done wrong as well. It's all about perception, about those in charge being seen not tolerating the undermining of the system and being seen penalizing those who've done some undermining. The implication left unspoken, but nevertheless impossible to avoid, is that the same thing that Jackie is up to needed to be done way up on the supposedly legitimate national and international ladder. Metaphorically speaking, of course, though, metaphorically speaking, the helper Jackie brings in, washed-up assassin Mickey, James Gandolfini, welcome to the Rileys, where the wild things are, who's not up to the task, seems like a pretty unmistakable stand-in for others who cannot or will not do the hard work of fixing a broken system. The masters of the universe are no better than Mickey, no better than drunk fat old hitmen who can't even be nice to hookers. Right off the bat, when the film began I thought I knew what I was in store for, the typical gangster crime drama with maybe a twist here and there for good measure. But boy, I sure was wrong. Killing Them Softly is a brutal, and often darkly funny film that pulls all of the punches of your typical crime film, but with such a refreshing perspective. Brad Pitt plays Jackie, the mob enforcer sent to kill 3 dumb criminals who single-handedly topple the criminal economy. This is probably his best role since Inglourious Bastard. He gave such a brilliant performance, probably one of the best of his career. Yes, I did rank Moneyball higher, but I personally thought this role was more suited for him, although he gave a brilliant performance there as well. Also starring in excellent roles include actors Ben Mendelsohn, James Gandolfini, Richard Jenkins, and Ray Liotta, all giving extraordinary performances. The whole cast is pretty much a crime film dream cast. The film was written and directed by Dominik, whose last film was 2007's The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which also starred Pitt and was an excellent film in its own right. The script was sharp, well-developed, and oftentimes darkly funny, and it features a satiric parable on capitalism woven into the plot. It is mainly a dialogue-driven film, but the dialogue is stunning and never feels out of place. The direction is quite well edited, with stylish cinematography. In conclusion of this sloppy review, Killing Them Softly may not be the best film of the year, but it is however a very good gangster story that is both very well developed and acted, and not to mention quite exciting. I don't highly recommend it, but it is worth at least one viewing. Australian writer-director Dominik is perhaps best known for his slow, contemplative and slow 2007 work of art, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, a film whose length lived up to its long-winded title, and did I mention it was slow? But the assured, masterful direction by Dominik compelled me to seek out his debut film, Chopper. The 2000 release was one of the very first Australian films I've seen. I'm discounting Finding Nemo here, and it immediately turned me into an Dominik believer. The movie is also largely the reason I've forgiven Australia for its cricket team, and Eric Bana for Hulk. Because where The Assassination of was a carefully constructed, atmospheric, epic western, Chopper was a wickedly funny, dark, twisted and stylish crime film that never took itself as art but had all the makings of it. And it was not long. Or slow. It is the movie Dominik should and deserves to be known for, just as much as he is for The Assassination of. In Killing Them Softly, Dominik returns to his Chopper roots, but mixes it up, every now and then, with the considered deliberation of The Assassination of, and some blatant social commentary, to give us his most accomplished film to date, though one that falls short of being the masterpiece it is being hyped to be. It's truly about time the Academy rolls out awards for the most hyped movies to the American media fraternity that determines its Oscar favorites on the basis of buzz that it creates itself. The film follows the aftermath of a mob heist by 3 amateur crooks, who are admittedly not the smartest guys, when the mob calls in a trusted enforcer, Jackie Cogan, Brad Pitt, to investigate. Billed as a crime thriller, the movie's plot is about as predictable as Brad Pitt's elf-like, immortal good looks. He's never going to be good for your ego, but it's what Dominik manages to conjure on the path to the movie's inevitable climax that constantly surprises you and is worth your ticket's price. Set in sparse New Orleans, the movie builds one of the most dramatic and tense heist scenes on camera, relying not on suggestive music but instead on silence as the operative prop, offset only by the nervous energy of Scoot McNairy. Then there's the reinterpretation of the mob shakedown scene where the audience is subjected to just as much of the raw, gritty and stomach-churning treatment that Ray Liotta's character is. There are also Tarantino-esque conversations between goons, black comedy like only the Coen brothers can manage, and a warped nod to David Chase's Sopranos through James Gandolfini's pitiful Mickey, whose conversations with Pitt's Cogan separate Dominik's take on contemporary mafia than the recycled versions we've seen too many times. And then there's style, slow-motion shattering of glass during a hit, use of Johnny's cash as the man comes around to introduce Kogan, and a surreal take on a hilarious stoner conversation, all established Dominik as a uniquely gifted director. He is of course helped by the fantastic cast he has lined up in the movie, from Animal Kingdom's Ben Mendelsohn, who brings about the biggest laughs as a zoned-out goon, to the dependable Richard Jenkins, who is the lawyer face of the recession hit Mafia, and everyone in between. All these elements should guarantee a classic, but the movie's in-your-face social commentary seem like Dominik's trying a little too hard. The movie takes place during 2008's recession and Obama's Yes We Can pre-election hope campaign, and draws parallels between corporate America and the mob. And if anyone missed the 40,000 instances where the campaign videos are playing in the background, Pitt's Kogan spells it out in the end too, so we get a quotable line for our Facebook status messages and believe that the movie is far more layered than we have discerned. The pace of the movie is also uneven and at times, it veers so far off the point that the point then seems like a hair follicle on Anil Kapoor's chest. There's also something to be said about Brad Pitt, whose charisma lights up every scene he is in. The biggest hurdle Brad Pitt has faced in his movies is that he is Brad Pitt. Because no matter how good an actor Pitt is, watching his movies is like taking part in a Spot the Brad Pitt competition. He may don a character's mask better than any contemporary movie star, but there are always those moments where the movie star breaks out of the mask and the audience goes, "That was so Brad Pitt." If the sum of the movie's remarkable scenes make for a great film, then Killing Them Softly deserves all its laurels, but if seen as a whole, the movie's like those exotic restaurants where delicious comes in such finite quantity that you need to go home and chomp on a box of Pringles to satiate your stomach. If you do the same, seek out Chopper while at it. You know, I don't have a cleaner or nicer way of making this starting point. Criminals are FK-ups, plain and simple. If they were smart, they would be something else for a living. If they were successful, they would be somewhere else other than dirty streets, dive bars, and Esthol homes. If they were wise, they would keep better friends. I'll grant that it takes a different kind of savvy, circumstance, heart, skill, loyalty, and mindset to be a criminal. Like any other group, they are their own special breed. We like to think that they are noble men pushed to doing bad things to redeem themselves. You're giving them too much credit. Even in the greatest and coolest crime or mob movies, from the charmers like Jack Foley in Out of Sight all the way up the ladder to the powerful Corleone family in the Godfather trilogy, you're still watching FK-ups. Movies can romanticize them all they want with noble codes, anti-hero character traits, and Robin Hood ideals. They're still FK-ups. Killing Them Softly, the new film from writer-director Andrew Dominik and starring the Studley four-time Academy Award nominee Brad Pitt, internalizes the subject of criminal FK-ups and puts them on display for us to enjoy. With a sharp and brutal edge of discourse and humor, Killing Them Softly is a very good crime film that trades action for conversation. It screened in competition out at the Cannes Film Festival in France back in May and is now making its domestic debut. Fashioned a little bit like a chatterbox Quentin Tarantino crime film like Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction, Dominik's film keeps its course when showcasing the criminal lifestyle being displayed. It embraces the despairing flaws that drive them and leaves most of the fake coolness at the door. As we enter our story set during the fall of 2008 in New Orleans, the window dressing of a mob movie is still here in Killing Them Softly. The late model cars, slicked back hair, ugly suits without ties, derogatory Italian terminology, leather jackets, hued sunglasses, and a constant cloud of exhaled cigarette smoke are everywhere to be seen, just as you might expect. However, the pulse of this setting is driven by the history of that year and season. Through ever-present imagery, intrusive car radio audio, and background television broadcasts, this movie is periodically narrated by the news of failing banks, Wall Street collapse, Republican opposition, and the hope and change of the winning Democratic president. In a mob movie such as this, our characters are acidic and cynical to these new tough economic times and refuse to cater to changes in business. This stark and ballsy setting and stance is, without a doubt, one of the strongest elements of the film. The plot follows various levels of those aforementioned FK-ups. At the absolute bottom rung of the ladder are a pair of released criminals, the well-intentioned but lonely Frankie, Scoot McNairy of Argo, and his junkie trainwreck of a friend Russell, Ben Mendelsohn of The Dark Knight Rises. They are talked into a job by local crime wannabe Johnny Amato, Vincent Curatola from The Sopranos, to hold up and rob a mob poker game run by made man Marky Trapman, Goodfellas star Ray Liotta. Since Marky admitted to robbing his own poker game the same way a few years back, Johnny thinks all of the blame will travel right back to Marky, leaving him and his boys clean and set. When the heist goes down, the mafia higher-ups are alerted afterwards that the game has now been hit twice. They just can't stand for that to become a regular precedence or occurrence. To deal with the situation and find those responsible, they send their unnamed spokesman, Academy Award nominee Richard Jenkins, to seek out Jackie Cogan, Pitt. With the nearly WWE-esque entrance music of When the Man Comes Around by Johnny Cash, we meet this ultra-focused and driven mob hitman and enforcer whose specialty is cleaning up messes and loose ends. The rub is that, due to the shifting economy, business isn't going to go as easy, or as profitable, as it used to. Nevertheless, once Jackie gets involved, people are going to die and killing them softly becomes that process and pursuit. The lead performance from Brad Pitt is the reason to buy your ticket to Dominik's film. Brad Pitt extends his legend of cool and screen presence with this razor-sharp character of tough talk and tough actions to back it up. As the least FK'd up of the FK-ups, Jackie's still willing to get his hands dirty while still cynically discussing the brutality and emotion of his work. To me, this is the polar opposite to his cop in Say 7 and from 15 years ago. That cop character was a young, short fuse of nobility and harsh reaction, where this hitman in Killing Them Softly is a slow burn of experience, focus, and analysis. He's an absolute blast to watch. After Pitt, things digress a little. The flawed gangsters are all fine, between a brief Sam Shepard appearance and the crosshairs on Ray Liotta. Our bumbling burglars of McNairy and Mendelsohn give us great banter and point of view. Mendelsohn nearly steals the show as the messy junkie. The weakest link is James Gandolfini, who plays one of Jackie's former partners that is brought in to help with the job. With his own billiards rack of clanking issues, I found that the movie nearly grinds to a halt when he's around in 2 long scenes. While those portions of the story help give us some insight and initiative towards Jackie, they take away from the real pursuit. I would have rather had more Richard Jenkins, whose pencil-neck mafia messenger was a better foil for conversation with Pitt. Still, I have to give Dominik compliments for a couple of things. 1. He reteamed with Brad Pitt after the underseen and underappreciated 2007 western The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, and bounced back with the gritty stuff. Go see his Australian film Chopper with Eric Bana's star-making lead performance that got him noticed by Hollywood in the first place. 2. He put together an excellent, pulpy, and atmospheric crime film with highly interesting and unique characters that broke through the usual mob movie stereotypes. 3. He adapted the 1974 crime novel Cogan's Trade by George V. Higgins and gave it gut-punching dialogue worth listening to. 4. He made the dated material more modern and topical with the 2008 financial crisis backdrop. Finally, he hired a better editor, resisted endless conversation, and delivered a movie that was half as long, 97 minutes, as the sometimes anguishing The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 160 minutes, and one with a title made of 1/3 the number of words. Killing Them Softly is a brutal tale of mob politics based on George V. Higgins' 1974 novel Cogan's Trade. On top of being a gritty gangster picture, the film provides a thoughtful commentary on America's current political and economical climate. Indeed, Dominik highlights that the mob and the government are in fact very similar, though neither party is prepared to admit it. For those unwilling to pay full attention and engage their brain, Killing Them Softly may be ultimately unsatisfying, as it asks more of you than a routine shoot-'em-up flick. While the film is maddening from time to time, it does contain a number of inspired moments, and it's rich with atmosphere and nuance. With the 2008 presidential election looming, a low-level gangster named Johnny Amato, Curatola, hires a pair of grungy hoods, McNairy and Mendelsohn, to rob a mob card game. The organizer of the card game, Marky, Liotta, has been known for robbing his own game in the past, and thus the robbers believe that the street will just assume that Marky is to blame yet again. After the heist, an unnamed mafia middleman, Jenkins, brings in an enforcer named Jackie Cogan, Pitt, to sort out the situation. Cogan's task is to seek reparations for the stolen money and kill anyone necessary in the process. Killing Them Softly clocks in at a refreshingly brisk 95 minutes, though Dominik's first cut reportedly ran a more sizable 2.5 hours. As a result, the picture does feel unusually streamlined, and the dialogue is perhaps a tad too terse, rendering the narrative somewhat difficult to follow. With a few key events actually happening off-screen, Killing Them Softly demands your fullest attention lest you get hopelessly lost. Interestingly, one of the primary concerns of Dominik's screenplay is social commentary. At several points throughout the film, characters literally stop what they're doing to listen to speeches delivered by either Obama or McCain as they lament the dire state of the American economy. Dominik draws parallels between mobsters and politicians, as both types of individuals only really care about themselves and are driven by the relentless pursuit of money. The very final line of dialogue delivered by Pitt solidifies this underlying theme in a very thought-provoking manner. Fortunately, Dominik supplemented the biting political satire with dark humor. Killing Them Softly is littered with amusing banter, as well as a memorably terrific instance of slapstick. Dominik is so often recognized for his distinctive cinematic style, and rightfully so, but his talent for colorful dialogue deserves acknowledgement as well. From a technical standpoint, Dominik's efforts are immaculate here. The picture exudes a marvelous sense of visual command, and it's slick and stylized while still feeling somewhat raw. The moments of violence are especially impressive thanks to Greg Fraser's cinematography and the extraordinary sound design. The heist sequence is nail-bitingly tense, and every time a punch is landed or a gun is discharged, we experience it in a visceral fashion. The death of one character is especially remarkable. It unfolds in ultra-slow motion, letting us absorb the visual symphony of bullets, broken glass, falling rain, and blood. It's a true spectacle of brutality, perhaps one of the most memorable instances of cinematic bloodshed in 2012. Another excellent touch is the music. Killing Them Softly is not suffused with an original score. Instead, Dominik mostly relied on an array of songs which add a great atmosphere to the picture. The most notable song choice is Johnny Cash's The Man Comes Around. The lyrics have strong parallels to the Jackie Cogan character, and the melodies are haunting. The cast is solid from top to bottom, but it's Brad Pitt who deserves the most credit. As Cogan, the actor is spot on, playing an interesting and complex anti-hero which is far removed from the type of performance we often see from him. Meanwhile, Richard Jenkins is predictably excellent here. Jenkins is suitably understated and low-key, yet always believable and riveting. Equally terrific is James Gandolfini as Mickey, one of Cogan's acquaintances. Rounding out the key players is Ben Mendelsohn, Animal Kingdom, who's skin-crawlingly creepy as a low-level hood, and Ray Liotta, who is surprisingly multifaceted as Gangster Marky. It's somewhat of a challenge to review Dominik's Killing Them Softly, as my thoughts on the film were actually changing throughout the writing process. Immediately after viewing the film I was left somewhat unfulfilled, but the more I contemplate it, the more I appreciate it. Ultimately, this is a solid motion picture, a stylized gangster flick with a relevant message that demands multiple viewings. Released on the cusp of the 2012 awards season, Dominik's Killing Them Softly was strangely, some might say cruelly, ignored by most of the mainstream awards, a fate which mirrored its failure to connect with a broad audience. Granted, it's still the most commercially successful film of Dominik's career and it did not want for critical attention, but this seems much too modest a fate for a film which, whilst flawed, is still a fascinating, often brilliant attempt to make a down-and-dirty crime thriller which doubles as a, perhaps too, pointed political commentary. Frankie, Scoot McNairy, and Russell, Ben Mendelsohn, are a pair of low-level hoods trying to scrape together a living amongst the criminal underclass of New Orleans. Whilst Russell's ambitions don't extend beyond kidnapping dogs and selling them on, Frankie has a touch more vision, and it's this that leads him to accept a job for Squirrel, Vincent Curatola, a local gangster who's fallen on hard times and has struck upon a plan to get a whole load of money without suffering any repercussions. Several years previously, a man named Marky, Ray Liotta, hired some men to rob an underground card game that he ran, taking the money for himself and destabilizing the criminal ecosystem for a few months. Marky eventually owned up to his part in the heist, but because he was so well liked and the move was so audacious, everyone treated it as a ballsy stunt and let him get away with it. If the card game got robbed a second time, however, everyone would suspect Marky of orchestrating it. So Frankie and Russell commit the robbery, safe in the knowledge that Marky will take the fall. To clean up the mess and restore confidence to the community, the powers that be bring in Jackie Cogan, Brad Pitt, a ruthlessly efficient hitman who sizes up the situation quickly and accurately. Marky couldn't have had anything to do with the robbery because he would never be so stupid to rob his own place 2 times, so someone else has to be responsible. However, Marky's innocence doesn't mean a thing to someone as pragmatic as Jackie. As he explains to his driver, Richard Jenkins, the only thing that matters is that someone is seen to pay for the crime, whether or not they were the ones behind it all. Marky has to die, and if the right guys get taken down along the way, that would be a bonus. Matters of justice don't matter where the market is involved. Although Brad Pitt is undoubtedly the star of Dominik's Killing Them Softly, its strength lies in its supporting cast, an ensemble which includes 2 surprisingly big names in the shape of Barack Obama and John McCain. The film is set against the backdrop of the 2008 financial collapse and accompanying presidential election, and both men are heard frequently on television and radio discussing the situation. Purely in terms of word count, the 2 senators would probably be 4th or 5th billed, whilst George W. Bush would probably get an ender with credit, since seemingly every moment of silence is filled with some archived discussion of how bailing out the banks is the only course of action, even though it's also morally reprehensible. It's not difficult to see the parallels between the actions being taken by low-level criminals and those being carried out by some of the most powerful men on earth, and nor is it meant to be. Dominik's script, based on the 1974 novel Cogan's Trade by George V. Higgins, makes its intentions clear early and often, both through the omnipresent white noise of political chatter, but also through its characters' hard-boiled dialogue, almost every line of which serves to underline and highlight in bold type what the themes of the film are. That's not a criticism in and of itself, since Killing Them Softly is not meant to be a subtle and nuanced discussion of the morality of macroeconomics, but the obviousness of the script at times threatens to derail the film and turn it into a feature-length lecture about the evils of appeasing the market at the cost of destroying lives. Fortunately, the performances are so strong and the actors giving them do such a wonderful job of grounding the political and the personal that the film manages to be both a polemic and a compelling drama, rather than sacrificing one for the other. There's a general tone of melancholy weariness throughout, with almost everyone resigned, to a greater or lesser extent, to their role in the story that is about to unfold. On the one end of the spectrum you have Jackie, who is fully cognizant of what is required of him and every other player in their bloody farce and, as such, views everything with a logical dispassion, and at the other end you have Mickey, James Gandolfini, a hitman that Jackie brings in to help carry out the hit on Marky. Now, Gandolfini spent the better part of a decade playing a world-weary murderer on The Sopranos, so it would have been all too easy for him to throw out the old familiar mannerisms. What's wonderful about his turn here, and what sets it apart as the best performance in the film, is how he suggests so much about Mickey without really doing anything. Most of his scenes are spent confined to a hotel room where he gets increasingly drunk and belligerent, but through his sheer physicality he conveys the bitterness, sadness, and loss of all joy that makes Mickey a compelling, if utterly unsympathetic, character. He looks like a man visibly being crushed by the world around him, barely holding it back with his significant bulk, and Gandolfini gets that across better through just appearing on screen than through saying any of Dominik's words, which again tend to be blunt and on the nose in a way that goes beyond noir styling. Most of the best moments, for that matter, are the ones in which the dialogue is minimal or absent entirely. Even though the film's vaulting ambition lies in its attempts at political critique, it still works wonderfully as a brutal, tense, and occasionally haunting crime story. The heist that kicks the plot into gear is deeply tense and unnerving, brimming with potential energy as it seems that any of the violent criminals, either the ones being robbed or the ones doing the robbing, could make the wrong move, and later in the film Dominik delivers possibly the saddest, loneliest, and most melancholy drive-by in cinema history. He also displays, in scenes such as a flashback in which Liotta is violently beaten, the same knack for crafting moments which are alternately funny, horribly violent, and deeply uncomfortable that made his debut, Chopper, such an indelible work. Although it ultimately fails to completely convince as a searing work of social commentary, though not for lack of trying, in fact it does the opposite, quite aggressively, that doesn't stop Killing Them Softly from being one of the very best films of last year. Dominik's consummate skill as a manufacturer of by turns bleak and elegiac violence, coupled with a fantastic cast all working at the very top of their abilities, ensures that the film is never anything less than engaging. At the same time, the contrast between the real-world concerns and events playing out in the background and the overtly stylized story and characters give a curiously sad state of the nation feel to the whole thing. It's a film that really feels like it's a story about America, one that offers a bleak, nihilistic vision of life on the bottom rungs of the economic ladder, which lends the whole thing a distinct flavor, even if the real meat of the thing lies in the more prosaic business of gangsters killing each other. Then again, given both the real and cinematic history of the country, is there anything more American than that? You know, things must be tough out there if the members of the criminal underclass are forced to do things that they have serious moral qualms about. 3 Less than professional criminals rob a mafia card game, framing Marky Trotman, Liotta, and throwing the entire criminal economy into turmoil. That is, until hired gun Jackie Cogan, Pitt, is called in to find out who is really behind the operation, and restore order to the town. Oh, it's also set against the 2008 election, but that won't matter until we get to the end. Sadly, the defining feature of Killing Them Softly is how forgettable it is. Dominik tried to set it apart from other crime dramas by pacing it differently, giving characters a bit more depth, and applying a moral to the story. However, he created some sort of perfect storm and wound up with something incredibly generic. The movie also takes itself just a bit too seriously. The reason Guy Ritchie's movies work so well, and are so memorable, is that the characters, or the setting, or the plot, are just past believable, and they are shot and edited with just a touch of parody. Killing Them Softly has the right characters, and there is certainly a hint of camp in the beginning, but it doesn't carry through the end, and there is no single element that makes a lasting impact on the audience. Where Killing Them Softly really falls on its face is the ending. There are political ads from the 2008 US presidential election peppered throughout the film, and it's never really clear why any of that is important. Frankly, I assumed that the ads were only there to provide a time frame, perhaps give the setting a bit more depth, or to amplify and mirror the harsh economic climate the mafia was facing. To an extent, that goal is achieved, but the ads are so prevalent that they must have meant something much deeper to Dominik. The audience finally discovers the point of the constant election coverage, and indeed the whole movie, when Brad Pitt delivers his last line during President Obama's acceptance speech on election night, "America's not a country, it's just a business." Until that final line, there is no real indication that there is even a moral to the story. There are just criminals doing criminal things, which worked perfectly for Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Reservoir Dogs, and a whole host of other crime films. By trying to have a moral, and requiring a character to tell the audience just what that moral is, Dominik took his film from a fun mobster movie to something much more ham-fisted. Don't let that stop you from seeing it. Killing Them Softly is still a very fun, violent ride, and absolutely worth watching. Director Andrew Dominik's third feature film after Chopper and the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 2012's Killing Them Softly is a brutal tale of mob politics based on George V. Higgins' 1974 novel Cogan's Trade. On top of being a gritty gangster picture, the film provides a thoughtful commentary on America's current political and economical climate. Indeed, Dominik highlights that the mob and the government are in fact very similar, though neither party is prepared to admit it. For those unwilling to pay full attention and engage their brain, Killing Them Softly may be ultimately unsatisfying, as it asks more of you than a routine shoot-'em-up. While the film is maddening from time to time, it does contain a number of inspired moments, and it's rich with atmosphere and nuance. With the 2008 presidential election looming, a low-level gangster named Johnny Amato Curatola hires a pair of grungy hoods, McNairy and Mendelsohn, to rob a mob card game. The organizer of the card game, Marky, Liotta, has been known for robbing his own game in the past, and thus the robbers believe that the street will just assume that Marky is to blame yet again. After the heist, an unnamed mafia middleman, Jenkins, brings in an enforcer named Jackie Cogan, Pitt, to sort out the situation. Cogan's task is to seek reparations for the stolen money and kill anyone necessary in the process. Killing Them Softly clocks in at a refreshingly brisk 95 minutes, though Dominik's first cut reportedly ran a more sizable 2.5 hours. As a result, the picture does feel unusually streamlined, and the dialogue is perhaps a tad too terse, rendering the narrative somewhat difficult to follow. With a few key events actually happening off-screen, Killing Them Softly demands your fullest attention lest you get hopelessly lost. Interestingly, one of the primary concerns of Dominik's screenplay is social commentary. At several points throughout the film, characters literally stop what they're doing to listen to speeches delivered by either Obama or McCain as they lament the dire state of the American economy. Dominik draws parallels between mobsters and politicians, as both types of individuals only really care about themselves, and are driven by the relentless pursuit of money. The very final line of dialogue delivered by Pitt solidifies this underlying theme in a very thought-provoking manner. Fortunately, Dominik supplemented the biting political satire with dark humor. Killing Them Softly is littered with amusing banter, as well as a memorably terrific instance of slapstick. Dominik is so often recognized for his distinctive cinematic style, and rightfully so, but his talent for colorful dialogue deserves acknowledgement as well. From a technical standpoint, Dominik's efforts are immaculate here. The picture exudes a marvelous sense of visual command, and it's slick and stylized while still feeling somewhat raw. The moments of violence are especially impressive thanks to Greg Fraser's cinematography and the extraordinary sound design. The heist sequence is nail-bitingly tense, and every time a punch is landed or a gun is discharged, we experience it in a visceral fashion. The death of one character is especially remarkable. It unfolds in ultra-slow motion, letting us absorb the visual symphony of bullets, broken glass, falling rain, and blood. It's a true spectacle of brutality, perhaps one of the most memorable instances of cinematic bloodshed in 2012. Another excellent touch is the music. Killing Them Softly is not suffused with an original score. Instead, Dominik mostly relied on an array of songs which add a great atmosphere to the picture. The most notable song choice is Johnny Cash's The Man Comes Around. The lyrics have strong parallels to the Jackie Cogan character, and the melodies are haunting. The cast is solid from top to bottom, but it's Brad Pitt who deserves the most credit. As Cogan, the actor is spot on, playing an interesting and complex anti-hero which is far removed from the type of performance we often see from him. Meanwhile, Richard Jenkins is predictably excellent here. Jenkins is suitably understated and low-key, yet always believable and riveting. Equally terrific is James Gandolfini as Mickey, one of Cogan's acquaintances. Rounding out the key players is Ben Mendelsohn, Animal Kingdom, who's skin-crawlingly creepy as a low-level hood, and Ray Liotta, who is surprisingly multifaceted as Gangster Marky. It's somewhat of a challenge to review Dominik's Killing Them Softly, as my thoughts on the film were actually changing throughout the writing process. Immediately after viewing the film I was left somewhat unfulfilled, but the more I contemplate it, the more I appreciate it. Ultimately, this is a solid motion picture, a stylized gangster flick with a relevant message that demands multiple viewings. It took 5 years following the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford for Dominik to return to the director's chair. 5 years is a long time to build anticipation for an obviously skilled filmmaker, and his skill is what gets Killing Me Softly through some narrative rough patches. But on the whole, this neo-noir is disappointingly mediocre. The problem is the story. It moves slowly, like Jesse James, and goes nowhere, unlike Jesse James. Stakes? Utterly non-existent. Yes, blood is spilt as the body count climbs, but Dominik seems indifferent or more interested in creating political equivalencies than utilizing his apparent skill in a satisfyingly cinematic way. Brad Pitt stars as Jackie Cogan, a mob enforcer called down to New Orleans in 2008 after a high-stakes poker game is robbed by two know-nothing punks, Scoot McNairy and Ben Mendelsohn. Marky Trapman, Ray Liotta, hosted the game and has a history of arranging such incidents for his own financial gain in the past, which means everyone in the city with a gun has his sights set on Marky. While America's financial systems collapse around them, Jackie and his financier, Richard Jenkins, take quick action to keep the local mob economy afloat. Their answer: bring in Mickey, James Gandolfini, a hitman from New York, to show the community what happens to people who hold up poker games. It's there when the film begins to go downhill. Pre-Mickey, Killing Them Softly is tense and darkly humorous. You realize as he's meandering through his second or third lengthy soliloquy, however, that neither he nor this film has much interesting to say. And Gandolfini isn't bad. It's the screenplay that does him wrong and holds the film back. Dominik's directorial flourishes and Pitt's confident performance are what salvage Killing Them Softly. It's hard to decide whether the film's best scene is a brutal but brilliant murder in slow motion or Pitt's final moment, Richard Jenkins. The former is technically cool and tonally audacious. The latter ends a somewhat limp film with a kick-ass bang, and Pitt's delivery is on point, both here and throughout the film. For something that never quite comes together, Killing Them Softly's highs are damn high. From a performance perspective, however, Pitt's in a league all by himself. To be fair, both Scoot McNairy, Argo, and Ben Mendelsohn, Animal Kingdom, are unrecognizable, but neither performance sets the film on fire. Richard Jenkins, playing against type, is adequate. And Ray Liotta is merely on hand to get mercilessly beaten over and over again. Dominik's choice to mirror what's going on here with the financial collapse of 2008 is both interesting and a little distracting. In lieu of traditional music, Killing Them Softly is scored by speeches given George W. Bush and Barack Obama. By the time Dominik gets around to crossing the T's and dotting the I's of his thesis, the move makes sense. It's the road there that's riddled with potholes. Like the film itself, it feels like this thread is going nowhere for way too long. One good, not even great, scene doesn't make up for 90 minutes of tedium. That's ultimately what the film amounts to, unfortunately. While Dominik and Pitt proved to be a formidable duo for the second film in a row, the final product doesn't touch Jesse James, which sparkled thematically and stylistically. This film nails the former, even though Greg Fraser's great cinematography still pales in comparison to Roger Deakins' genre-defining work on Jesse James. It's the story, the plot, and Dominik's message that feel, sadly, muddled at best. Killing Them Softly is about some two-bit hoodlums who decide to knock off an illegal card game. Not a good idea to begin with, the kind of idea that would ordinarily put you in a body bag. But the thing about this particular card game is that, if all goes according to plan, the blame will get pinned on someone else and these guys will get away scot-free. With that all settled, they pull it off gorgeously, and just as predicted, their scapegoat takes the heat. But the fact remains that some bad guys got robbed, and now things ain't exactly clockwork in the world of underground poker. So the bad guys send in one of their own to take care of the scapegoat, figure out what went down, and finally get things running again. Having been around the block and being damn good at his job, their guy gets down to business to start setting things right. First things first, let's address that verdict. Word has it that I'm in the minority with this one, and the last thing I need is someone reaming me out for wasting their time and cash. I know the struggle, and I swear I have my reasons. Nonetheless, I don't expect to change anyone's mind here, especially if you've already seen it. Because as much as I liked it, it's easy to see why so many didn't, judging by the trailer, the poster, and the oh-so-subtle title change. I'm gonna guess that this wasn't the movie that folks had in mind. Going out on a limb here, but I'm guessing the expectation was 97 minutes of Brad Pitt killing people, softly, of course, with that handy-dandy shotgun of his. I'm also guessing these are the same folks who were mighty disappointed when they realized The American was just George Clooney building a gun for 2 hours. And that's a completely understandable expectation given the way this movie's been pitched. Hell, if I hadn't known any better I would have been in the same boat, and probably just as pissed, too. See, the reality of the situation is that Killing Them Softly is anything but the movie it's being sold as. And as a result, it's become a victim of its own publicity. At its core, Killing Them Softly, a talking heads movie with some violence on the side, all of which is shown in the trailer, all of which is over in a flash. Granted, that ain't the easiest movie to sell, but selling instead as a rootin' tootin' killin' spree was just a foolproof formula for disappointment. But I think that's the difference between me and a lot of the folks who went into this. Killing Them Softly is exactly what I expected. A couple years back, I had the pleasure of being introduced to a movie called The Friends of Eddie Coyle. For those who haven't seen it, it's a lot like Killing Them Softly. It's a talking heads movie with some violence on the side where shady dudes do shady stuff in the back alleys and dive bars of Boston. When people get offed, it's business as usual, and when the action gets going, it's over before you know it. For Chris sakes, it was my introduction to Robert Mitchum, and believe it or not, it was one of the coolest movies I'd ever seen. Still is, actually. The reason I mention all this is because it's adapted from a novel by a guy named George V. Higgins. As much as I can accredit the cast and crew for everything I love about Eddie Coyle, it's undeniable that Higgins is the reason it's so goddamn special. As it just so happens, Killing Them Softly is based on Higgins' third novel, Cogan's Trade, a far less misleading title. So, realizing the rarity of a Higgins adaptation, I started doing my homework. Crossed Cogan's Trade off my reading list, and being semi-unfamiliar with writer-director Andrew Dominik, went and bumped The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford to the top my Netflix queue. Now, this is usually the part where I talk about how awesome the book was and what a tall order the movie had to fill, but for once, I'm toning it down. Not saying that it was a bad book, just takes some getting used to is all. The best thing about Higgins is that the dude can write dialogue. His authentic tone of voice and knack for writing the way people talk is exactly what makes his stories so compelling. However, that's just about all the dude writes. I kid you not, 95% of a Higgins novel is set inside quotation marks where characters go on chronic tangents, briefly mention something relevant to the plot, then go right back to rambling about God knows what until you've hit the back cover. It's a lot like Pulp Fiction actually, if Jules and Vincent were the only characters, and all they talked about were royales with cheese, and there weren't any acts of God for them to deal with, just bullets and bodies galore. Probably not doing this movie any favors with that comparison, but then again, Pulp Fiction just wouldn't be Pulp Fiction without royale with cheese. As much as I love Higgins' dialogue, it can be a chore to get through in print. But for some reason, it translates beautifully to film. Guess it's one thing to read a conversation and another to actually hear it. Sure made it a lot funnier. And from one scene to the next, the cast does a fantastic job of acting natural, talking like people, and creating these totally believable, totally unique bottom dwellers in turn. The only one who seems out of place is Brad Pitt, if only because he's just too damn pretty to be amongst rogues like these. Not his best performance, not his worst either, but the mullet only goes so far in convincing us he belongs here. But all in all, they bring the goods, and I just loved listening to them talk. Sure, they can be vulgar as sin, and James Gandolfini is way too long-winded for his own good, but it's been a long time I've seen dialogue get written or delivered like this. Still, solid as they may be, Andrew Dominik's the reason this movie works like it's supposed to. It's clear that he's seen Eddie Coyle, it's clear that he's read Cogan's Trade, and it's clear that he's a fan of both. I mean, there are a lot of ways that this story could have been told, ways that could have been far more popular with the viewing public. But rather than compromise, he plays to Higgins' strengths. He doesn't sugarcoat the violence, he keeps the story straightforward, and doesn't overcomplicate things by taking the focus away from the characters. The only liberties he does take includes moving the setting out of Boston, getting a little too stylish for his own good, and fostering this notion of two Americas that's completely exclusive to his script. Hard to explain that last bit without seeing it play out for yourself, but while it felt a bit odd initially, it ultimately makes for a pretty provoking juxtaposition between the country we pledge to and the country we live in. Because of Dominik, not only does this movie look exactly the way it should, and at times better than it should, but it's a movie that would make Higgins proud. And as a fan of Higgins, what more could you ask for? This film. Directed by Andrew Dominik. Screenplay by Andrew Dominik. Based on Cogan's Trade. Produced by Brad Pitt. Starring Brad Pitt. Cinematography Greg Fraser. Edited by Brian A. Cates. Production companies Annapurna Pictures. Distributed by the Weinstein Company. Release dates May 22, 2012. Running time 97 minutes. Country United States. Language English. Budget $15 million. Box office $37.9 million.